This is the Better Life Podcast with Brandon Turner and
Cam Cathcart.
All right, so if you're new to the show and you didn't listen to the episode where I brought Cam in and introduced him again, because you were on episode, early
April,
episode.
I think.
Yeah, way back a long time ago. Cam is now the new co-host of the podcast.
Yes.
Dude,
I can't wait. It's going to be amazing,
It's going to
man.
be so good. I'm so excited. Do we sound too much alike, do you think?
No.
Are people going to be able to tell?
Talk to you.
Yeah, I might need to get a southern accent while we talk. I don't know. I think people can tell the difference. You have to let us know in the comments of the YouTube video if we sound too much alike and I need to be southern from now on.
Yeah.
Actually, you're the one in the South.
I was born in Texas. I was born in Texas, y'all.
All right, so today's show, I'm super excited about it. Today we have on actually my personal CPA and my attorney. Now, everyone just turned off the episode and you're watching cat videos now. But for those who are still here, this show is actually a lot of fun. We just got finished recording it, so we're already done. We know what's coming. I loved it. You loved it?
I had a
loved it.
blast. It was so much fun and loved getting to hear from our guests. They were incredible people.
They're funny people. They're incredible people. They're smart people. They're all the good things. So in this episode, a few things we covered. Self-discipline.
Yes, covered self-discipline. They're both great at it. They're both way better at it than I am. One of them wakes up at 4 every morning.
Which
is incredible.
Insane. We spent a lot of time talking about the 6 different investor types. So like newbies, what should they do from a tax and legal standpoint? Experienced people, what should they do from legal and tax? And like the passive investors, syndicators, what should different people? We wanted every person to listen to this show. That means you listen to this show. That we are going to cover what you should know about legal and tax. So you stay out of jail and you pay the government as little as possible.
And here's something that I did learn, that I am way overexposed. Right, or my friend.
Your friend
is way overexposed right now. So
you got some. Your friend has some changes to make. Before this episode airs. All right, we talk about a tax strategy that you've never heard of before that could land you in jail, but it's also really funny and you're gonna love it. So,
and it might get some people divorced.
It might get some people divorced, and that might not be a bad thing.
I'm calling Lexi right after this.
We talk about a near-death experience that one of our guests had today. We talk about beauty pageants, and we talk about chasing a dog down the road on a first date. So that and more today.
Can't wait for you to watch it.
I can't wait to. Hey, real quick before we get into that show, though, Cam, what's new in your life real estate-wise?
Man, we
buy anything?
Yes, we're trying to just continue to buy houses. So it's this month we're 7, I think now. Yeah, 7 houses. We bought two on Sunday, and then what's today? Tuesday. Didn't buy one yesterday. I don't know if we bought one today. I got to go through my email. So
I didn't buy one today either. I think it's been a month for me, but whatever.
Yeah, but you're buying $200 million apartment complexes. I'm buying $200,000 houses.
But that's why I think we're going to make a good duo on this podcast, is because we're coming at it from 2 different standpoints. Dude, I'm excited. So
I cannot wait.
Well, you know what I can't wait for? Amanda and Mauricio. So let's bring them in.
Let's bring them in.
Mauricio, Amanda. I looked at you wrong.
You did.
Mauricio, Amanda. Welcome to the podcast. Good to have you guys here.
Yeah, excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm pumped to have Cameron here as well today.
I am excited to be here.
Yeah, this is the first time with Cam in the room. We've never done a 4-person podcast, I don't think, either. New things.
Ours was.
Ouch.
Alex was in on
Oh,
us.
you're right.
Yes.
Alex was in the one you and Lexi were in with us. All right. Well, thanks for coming on today. For those who don't know, Amanda, so I know you, Amanda, for a long time now. I know you as a real estate CPA. Maybe not but the real estate investor CPA. Like you're the person. You wrote several phenomenal books, including the book on tax strategies for the savvy real estate investor. Yep. My personal CPA, been working with me and saving me money for almost a decade now. And a good close friend of mine. I also know you, Mauricio, as a deeply handsome man, a attorney as well, in the real estate attorney for real estate investors. My own lawyer as well, attorney. Is that the same thing? Attorney, lawyer?
Yeah.
There's no difference.
There is no difference.
Why do we have 2 words for it?
I don't know.
Okay. I know you. I know you as all of that, and the author of the new book, and I don't get the title wrong, so let me just check here. Legal Strategies for Everyone. Now, who's that for?
That was hard. That is for everyone.
Okay, Legal Strategies for Everyone. I know you as that, and the survivor of a near-death experience, which I'm sure we'll get to later. But before all that, and I want to actually start with Amanda. Who was Amanda Han and Mauricio. But let's start with Amanda Han. Who was Amanda Han?
Who was Amanda Han?
Yeah, take us way back.
How far back do you want to go?
As far as you are willing to take us.
Oh man. So, well, I'm actually the third generation of real estate investors in my family. So, unlike most people, who are like brand new to real estate, and read the Rich Dad Poor Dad book, I had a really interesting upbringing in that my parents were rich dad and poor dad. So I grew up in a family with my dad.
You had two dads?
Not my two dads. Yeah, that's a good one. So my grandparents and my dad, they were entrepreneurs. All my uncles own their own businesses. So I was always brought up in that business mentality. And then my mom came from just a very traditional upbringing, not as much money. So I kind of saw both sides of it. And I think it's really interesting because even though my dad was an entrepreneur, he always taught me to just take the traditional route, go to school, get a good job. And what's a more stable job than being an accountant, right? Especially for a girl, it's like, it's a very steady job. And so I think, I kind of just followed those steps and became an accountant, did good in school. And I think I got really fortunate to kind of fall into the realm of real estate, to be where I'm at, to be able to kind of combine my passion for taxes and real estate together.
Did you start by saying like real estate is the focus I'm going to do? Like you started with real estate, or were you just like working for one of the big firms?
Yeah, I actually know. I had no idea about. So my grandparents were real estate investors, and they're kind of what you traditionally think about when you think about investors. In that we lived in the apartments where my grandpa invested. So I was like the landlord's grandkid, and we would go and deal with rehabs and collecting rent. And my grandpa fixed the toilets. And I never wanted to be a real estate investor. I wanted a corporate job. I want to have nice nails and talk on the phone. So I became an accountant. But when I started my career at one of the big four international firms, I happened to end up in the real estate group. So that's what I did. I learned how to do real estate taxes. And I actually didn't think that I wanted to invest in real estate until many years later, when my dad got sick and I had to end up taking care of him for a period of time, when I realized that, my steady job of being an accountant was actually not that steady because it didn't allow me the time to care for my dad the way I wanted to. And that's kind of how I got into the investing side. So I was not like always real estate.
When did you leave and start your own business?
So when I started investing in real estate, I was like many of our listeners. I think it's just going to real estate clubs and, meeting people, learning how to invest. And that's when I realized that the average investor are not aware of the different strategies that a lot of my wealthy clients at the time were utilizing. And so there was kind of a pivot point where my husband and I were like, you know what, we're going to be investing in real estate and we want to help everyday investors and just kind of give them exposure to these types of strategies that, wasn't readily available for the everyday investor.
It's amazing.
Where'd you meet your husband, Matt?
Well, we're both accountants, and I always joke.
It's a fun
because,
household, I bet. Yeah. It's a super fun household.
So it is really fun.
He's a fun guy. He's a fun guy.
I was in the real estate group, and my husband Matt was in the high net worth individual group. So naturally, our work overlapped quite a bit because I was on the business side and he was on the individual owner side. And a funny story, when I first met him, he's 2 years ahead of me in terms of like the position. So I kind of worked for him a little bit. So I'm always trying to impress, right? New job, I want to impress him. So
impress the boss.
What's a good question to ask? And I said, why did you decide to go into the high net worth group? What was it about it that attracted you? And he said, well, I'm just looking for a sugar mama. And I was pretty shocked, and that was kind of the end of, that conversation. But yeah.
Did you guys talk to HR before you got to start courting?
It was a secret because you're not really supposed to date.
Under the table.
It was a secret that everybody knew about, but we thought it was a secret. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's awesome. Any idea how I found you? Do you know? Was it just you were on Bigger Pockets or doing something?
So
how did we get
actually,
connected?
you found me because I was doing a lot of speaking, I think, with Bruce Norris, and I think you heard me probably, I think with Dave Lindahl, who did Apartments at the time.
Yeah.
And then you reached out and asked me to be on Bigger Pockets. I actually didn't know what Bigger Pockets was.
Really?
But my
Ooh.
personality, I'm always like, sure, I'd love to do it. And
It changed your life.
it changed my life. And I actually still didn't know what Bigger Pockets was after the podcast until like a year later. You know, people started calling me, and I'm like, how did you hear about me? And they said, Bigger Pockets, Bigger Pockets. So I said, I should check out this Bigger Pockets thing.
Yeah, I never got an invite. So
Yeah.
And I think we'll be hearing about this a lot today.
Yeah,
No invite.
Mauricio, that's the third time. Mauricio's got to invite sadness. So I'd like to invite Mauricio to tell us, who was Mauricio Rauld? Am I saying your last
I
name
think so.
correct?
No, but
No,
nobody
oh,
says
shoot.
it correct.
Tell me how you really say it.
Look, everybody says Raould, which is fine.
Okay, I didn't say that.
No, so you said Raould.
Yes. I'm trying to shorten
It's a
it.
French last name, so it's really Raould. So nobody's going to say Raould.
Okay.
So it was Raould and Raould. But we go with Raould now. I think it's
Raould.
Raould. It's just easy to say Raould. I think.
Raould.
But I don't care. It's
Okay,
not a big
fine.
deal.
All right. Well, who was Mauricio Rauld?
So Mauricio Rauld was. So I was born in Santiago, Chile. So I'm an
did not know
immigrant. Grew up in England of all places because I was born right before the big bloody coup in Chile. So I was born in '72. We had the coup. Dictator Pinochet comes in and basically runs havoc with the country, and so my parents kind of fled or decided to leave for England. So I actually grew up until I was at 10 or 11 years old in England, and went back and forth between England and Chile. My dad always got homesick and tried to go back, but it was very political. It was hard to get a job, and so we ended up going back to England. And then the last time we came back to Chile, when we fled to England, my dad's best friend came to the U.S., and he's always been trying to convince him to come. And so we ended up, the last time, instead of going back to Chile, we came to the U.S. And so I've been here now for, 35 years or 36 years. But I got here when I was 15 years old, did my undergrad up at UC Berkeley, then went to law school here in L.A., and then did what every, attorney loves to do. Worked at a law firm here in L.A., and I did a lot of litigation. So lawsuits, represented some of the big, brokerage houses, J.P. Morgan, Merrill Lynch, Goldman Sachs, all those guys. But I was on the litigation side, so that was fun. I would do, court and depositions and that kind of stuff. But I knew there was it just wasn't something I wanted to do. I was literally, lawyers work a lot of hours. Yeah. I mean, way more than CPAs. I mean, way
That's
more
not
than CPAs.
true, guys.
We bill our hours
Not
every
true.
6 minutes. We're like crazy. And so I was literally had a lifestyle where I was getting up in the morning and I would literally, shower, get dressed, get in the car, drive to work all day, work all night, come home, maybe work out if I had a little bit of time, ate dinner and went to bed, and I did it all over again. It was basically the rat race. I didn't know the term the rat race back then, but that's what it was. And I even had out of body experiences where I was on the 9th floor and it'd be 11 o'clock at night and I'm working by myself. And I could literally almost see a helicopter. It's an out of person experience where I'd come out and I'd be looking through the window back and the whole building is dark except my office, the light's on, and it's I'm working my butt off. And I'm like, there's got to be something more to this. This is brutal. And then, and on the weekends, because you got to win on the weekends because you can't get all your hours done during thing. I would literally go to, you have to sign in on the security, when you check in, and I would see all the partners that had checked in on a Sunday at 7 a.m. And I was like, wait a minute, these guys have been here for 10, 15, 20 years. They've got families, they're family men, and they've got 5 kids at home, and here they are checking in at 7 a.m.
With 4 different
on a Sunday.
With 4 different spouses.
With 4 different spouses. So I'm like, I don't want to do that. You always think when you become partners. So luckily for me, I see you got Rich Dad Poor Dad. So I came across Rich Dad Poor Dad, right when it came out. I was on a flight back from Miami, read that whole book, and literally on the flight, as with many people, right, changed my life. Super lucky because literally 2 weeks after I wrote the book, after I got back from Miami, I hear a drop-in from Robert Kiyosaki on the radio. Literally back then we were listening to radio. I'm driving my car in LA, got the radio, and he was sort of endorsing the real estate guys. I know you guys know Rob and Russ, and so they were doing a seminar down there. And if it hadn't been for that book, I wouldn't have heard about the real estate guys and hadn't gone to this event. And it was such a pivotal moment because that's what led me to leave my job because I didn't want to stay there forever and go work in-house for the real estate guys where I did all of their syndication and kind of legal, was their general counsel. So that was a big pivot for me because that got me out of sort of the rat race and I was kind of doing more thing. And then, that led into me starting my own firm. After 2 or 3 years working for the guys, started my own firm, started helping some of their, members and stuff, and created Premier Law Group 2006. And had my firm ever since. So that's how I got here.
Man. Yeah. Little known fact, I used to listen to the real estate radio guys religiously before Bigger Pockets. And so then when I came on to help Josh, like, I was volunteering and writing blog posts. I was like, Josh, we start a podcast. He's like, what's that? I was like, I've been listening to the show, the Real Estate Radio guys, and they're like talking about real estate, and they're really good. We can never hope to be as big as them, but we can try, and we could work at it. And they were the inspiration for what became the Bigger Pockets Real Estate Podcast.
That's awesome. I didn't know that.
Did you also know I was going to be a lawyer? Did we ever talk about that?
That you were going to be a lawyer?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you said you were at some point thinking about it.
Yeah,
or
I took the
did
LSAT.
you
I
said-
took the
oh my
LSAT.
God.
You took the LSAT.
Yeah, I took the LSAT, and then I read John Grisham's book, The Firm.
Oh, it's a great book.
Yeah, it's a great book.
Great
but
book.
He kept ripping on lawyers about like working 100 hours a week and on their fourth wife and their partners that are still working 80 hours a week. And I started looking into it from that book. I'm like, is that really a lawyer's life? And every lawyer I've ever talked to now, ever since then, is like, yeah, you made the right choice.
You made the absolute right, because you get into those that proverbial golden handcuffs, because you make a lot of. You go in there making. I'm a how old is I? 22-year-old kid making six figures, and that's a lot of money. And then you end up getting you get a mortgage and a house and everything, and then you just can't leave. Like I was lucky enough that I found the realistic guys, that I found the book, Kiyosaki's book, before I had a mortgage, before I was married, before I had kids. So it was easier for me to put, because look. When I talked to those guys about coming over, they were paying me like 60, 70% of what I was making at the firm. Yeah. So, but it was a different lifestyle. It wasn't billing my hours. It was more of a 9-to-5 gig, and there was no pressure to bill hours and all that stuff. So that was a pivotal moment for me. It was when I left, and I wouldn't have been able to do that if I had a mortgage and had all these responsibilities.
Well, that actually illustrates a point that I think a lot of people find themselves in, and I'll say it this way: is like, I think probably the number one financial mistake that people make that keeps them from ever becoming a millionaire, and I'd love to know your thoughts if you agree or disagree, but it's that if you think about life, and if you were like, your income goes up and down throughout life. Like you have a job that makes a lot of money, you have a job that makes a little money, or you have a commission job where 1 month is really good. I think the mistake people make is that I know people make the mistake. I've made this mistake, is that they base their lifestyle expenses off of the peak and not off the valley, right? So if your income goes up and down, as soon as you get that raise of any kind, you start making more money, you then base all your expenses. You buy a house, you buy a car, you buy everything at that price point. And then now anytime you dip below that peak, you're just struggling for the rest of your life. And that's where lawyers get trapped into. They got to have the nice car and the BMW and the whole thing, because they're basing their life off that peak, so they can never lose that peak. But if you want to get rich, like you have to either A, make a lot of money and spend way less and then invest it all, or you have to go and be an entrepreneur and got to go start something. Both of those are impossible to do if you're living at the peak. You're stuck there forever.
And I was going to say that something I've been thinking about a lot too, to that vein, is this thing called like an income ratio, where it's really not how much you necessarily make, but it's how much of what you make are you able to live off? Like, is it 90%? Is it 80%? Is it 50%? And if you can get to the point where you're living off 50, 60% of what you earn, then that delta is obviously what you can do to invest and grow your wealth that way. I know Jim Rohn I'm a big fan of Jim Rohn. Jim Rohn used to say something to the effect, it was like, he's telling everybody about you should really, live on 70%, and you should give, 10% to charity, 10% for passive investments, and 10% to income. And then he said something like, I probably spend 10% of what I make. Like if I spent 90% of what I make, that would be obscene. And that was such a mind-blowing thing. And something like, wow, there are people out there that make so much money that they only spend 10% of it. Like, I want to be that guy.
I remember Rick Warren, right, from Saddleback Church. Like his whole thing was like he ties 90, does a 90, or what's it called, reverse tithe or something like that?
Reverse tithe,
90% of it he gives away, which is like, I remember thinking like, how much money do you have to make to give away 90%? And I'm like, I want to do that. That sounds pretty cool. Like, oh, that sounds
great.
great.
We're all entrepreneurs here. For me, for example, a similar scenario where when I left my job, a very high-paying, steady job, to start out our own firm, definitely had to make that sacrifice, right? Because I was living with a paycheck, and now all of a sudden I'm not. But intentionally being able to like budget and know like you're doing that for a specific reason to get out of that rat race, and seeing what other people were doing that were partner level, 10 years, 20 years ahead, still working the weekends. But yeah, I think that is kind of a common mistake, that people are like, I make so much money, but I don't have any money, right? Because you're spending it all.
So when you made that jump, how did you do it? Because you went from a high-paying job to starting your own thing. How did you do it? How did you come up with the funds to do it? How did you get the courage to do it?
Yeah, it was really scary because so for my husband and I, we both quit. I got pregnant at that point in time. So it was like, not only did we no longer have steady income, but we also now had like a real mouth to feed. It wasn't just us on ramen anymore. And I think that was really the driving force. Like, well, we have to make it, right? What else are we going to do? We can go back to the job that we didn't want to do anymore, or we can, push forward. But we were really fortunate because at the time, like I said, there wasn't really a lot of CPAs who were helping everyday investors. So we kind of we had a built-in audience, right? Because we were investing in real estate. Those people were our peers. So we never really had to suffer too much in terms of like at least paying the bills and stuff. But I do remember it took us about 3 years before we realized like, oh, now we're finally making the same amount of money that we were making 3 years ago with our job.
And working way more, probably.
And working way more, because, at a big firm, you had assistants, you had people in the mailroom. When it was just me and my husband, it's like, where's the mailroom? Oh, that's you. Who's getting paper?
I love that quote that says an entrepreneur is someone who works, 80 hours a week to avoid working 40?
Yeah.
Like it's just what we do. Like we all work way more. We get into real estate and we get into entrepreneurship because we want financial freedom. And then we just work like 100 hours a week for the rest of our life for
I think
whatever
people have a
absurd reason.
misconception. People have a misconception that those who are successful don't work. But I feel like all of my clients who are very successful work a lot. But it's in a different way, a different mentality, right? Like you're really passionate about what you're doing. So it almost doesn't seem like it's work.
And you're also not working for someone. I think that's our DNA is like there's no way I could work. I have a hard time as it is. So just having your own, be able to, even if you do it wrong, you're doing it your way, and it's your way or the highway, and it's like you don't have to worry about having to report to somebody and do it their way. You don't take orders from anyone. You're the one making an order. That's to me the most attractive thing.
How do you guys as entrepreneurs do you struggle with self-motivation? Is there anything that you do to, when no one's telling you what to do, and maybe that's changed over the years, do you just get up and do the work, or do you ever wake up and just be like, I don't want to do anything today? Like,
I struggle with that, man. I'll be honest with you. I really struggle with that because I don't consider myself to be a super disciplined person. I have some things I do that people think, wow, that's super disciplined, but I really do struggle with that, and I really admire the folks that are able to do that. Tony Robbins talks about this a lot, where he calls it a muscle, not really a habit, but this habit that you make a decision and you do it. If you're going to jump into that cold pool, you just jump. You don't start arguing with yourselves. Oh, it's cold, so I jump in. I'm going to jump. No, I'm not going to jump in. You just make the decision. You go. The alarm goes off. You get up. You don't hit the snooze button. You want to get into that cold plunge, right? And it's a muscle that you need to develop. And I haven't figured out how to develop that muscle. I don't even know what exercises I'm supposed to be making. But I would love to be able to have that where I'm like, oh, I got to go to the gym. I don't really want to go to the gym. I would love to not have to argue with myself and just go do it because it's in my calendar and it just has to be done. I struggle a lot with discipline, and if I could overcome that, I'd be. Who knows where I'd be?
I think that's one of the hardest things, at least for me as an entrepreneur. And this year is my year. Like one of my quotes of the year is like, I'm not going to negotiate with myself, because if I tell you, hey, we're meeting for dinner at 6 o'clock, I'm going to be there at 6 o'clock. But if I tell myself, hey, I'm waking up at 6 a.m. to go to the gym, my alarm goes off and I'm like, I can hit snooze because it's myself. And at the end of the day, you just aren't respecting yourself. Like I would respect you more than myself. And so this is the year of not negotiating with myself. But I love that. But it also makes me mad that you say that, because I follow you on Instagram.
Oh yeah, and he wakes up at 4 a.m.
So you're telling me that you struggle with that, and you don't seem to.
Yeah.
Is the secret to success waking up at 4 a.m.?
I don't think so. I tend to do that just because it's the time that I have the most. But I mean, you could, some people are night owls. Some people, I think there's nothing. I have good friends that work from, midnight to 3 a.m. and that's their most productive time. And if that's you, you're obviously not going to get up at 4 a.m. You're going to sleep in till 10. But I don't think it matters. I still get 7-8 hours of sleep every night. I just go to bed really early. But I love getting up early because there's just nothing out there, and you've got all this time, and there's no distractions. And even if there were, there's no expectation that somebody. And so it's like I love that freedom in the mornings. And then my absolute favorite time of the day is just that daybreak. Like when that first light comes out, to me, it's magical.
I think it's really interesting because I also perceive Mauricio as someone who's like really disciplined because he wakes up early. But I think for me, if I'm doing something that I'm really passionate about, then I'm very disciplined, right? Because I'm looking forward to doing it. If I'm working in my business, if I'm thinking strategies, if I'm building business, I'm very disciplined on what I need to do every day, and I'll do even more than what I plan for myself to do. But if it's something like exercising, which is my Achilles heel, I will negotiate with myself all day long because it's just not something that that I really enjoy, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not as disciplined on things like that.
I struggle with the fitness thing too, and it's like I know what to do. That's the frustrating part. Like I was telling my wife Heidi the other day, it's like I got up and I'm like, okay, I got to go work out. And I'm like, shall I go on the treadmill for 45 minutes? Shall I go to the beach? Shall I go lift weights? And I'm like, what do I feel like doing that day? And I'm like, that's not how it works. You got to come up with a plan. You got to figure out, this is where I am right now. This is where I want to be. Here's the plan. And again, to this muscle thing, Kobe Bryant talks about this all the time. He had this summer program of lifting weights, and he's like, well, this is where I am tonight. I need to do this. He wrote out the plan, and he said, that was it. The contract was signed and delivered. It wasn't a question of whether I was going to do it. It was going to happen because he made the decision. I just don't know, do I work out this? Do I do that? It's like, I know what to do, and it's so frustrating because it's just like,
Yeah, I'm a huge believer in like the whole idea of you sharpen your axe before you cut down the tree. Like I think it's an Abe Lincoln quote, or we say it's Abe Lincoln, it probably wasn't. But if I had 6 hours to chop down a tree, I'd spend the first 4 sharpening my axe. And so I apply that. For example, having a plan like at the gym, right? If I show up to the gym and I'm like, what do I do today? It's just gonna be a weak workout. If I show up and I'm like, I'm doing these 4, and I know ahead of time these 4 things, and it's in a format that I can follow, then I'm gonna actually get a way better workout. The same thing when I wrote the book on rental property investing versus the No and Low Money Down book. No and Low Money Down, I wrote when I wanted to, when I felt like it, what I wanted to, and it took me a year to write a book. When I wrote the book on rental property investing, which ended up being the best-selling book that I've written, I went to Starbucks with Heather and we outlined the entire book, every chapter, every subchapter, and then we wrote down like what are the bullet points in that section on the back of this little note card. So I had 100 and some note cards with everyone. So then for 100 days, every day, didn't miss one day, I just picked up a note card and it said, you're writing in the chapter on finding deals.
Love that.
And on the underneath that, it was on direct mail marketing. And on the back side, it was like, here's 5 bullet points about direct mail. That was the easiest book I've ever written. I mean, by far, because it was just like, oh, this is exactly what I'm doing. Okay, knock out 1,000 words, done. We did it for the book on managing rental properties too. Heather followed that. So yeah, by having that prescribed thing, which I would love then to throw the question, in the world of real estate investing, somebody wants to get into real estate. It's harder to do that, right? Because there's not like a one size fits all like approach to real estate investing. So how does somebody, would you recommend, like, is there a way to make that true in real estate? This is a question for all 3 of you, is how can a real estate investor adopt that mentality of like sharpen their axe ahead of time so that way they're just following a plan?
Well, I think it always starts with the vision, right? You've got to figure out what is it that you want to do. I mean, real estate's really just a means to an end. It's like, what do you really want to do? Do you want to have passive income and you just want to sort of do the least amount of work possible, or do you want to actually go, bust your butt, and like what kind of lifestyle you like? Why are you doing it? Because without a vision, it's like it doesn't even matter. So I think it always starts with that vision, and then from there you start setting the goals, which is what you did. You went down and said, okay, here's the goals. And when you're writing down those goals, I also like to differentiate whether are you looking at the outcome goals, like this is the outcome, or what are actually step by step. You were doing the step by step, right? Like this is what I need to do. So I think it's the same with real estate. It's like once you start figuring out what you want out of it, and you're clear on where you want to go, then you start thinking, okay, well, I'm going to be a wholesaler, or I'm going to be a fix and flipper, or I'm going to be a syndicator, or I'm going to be a buy and hold. But it all starts with a vision, right?
Yeah. And I think it's really important to avoid the shiny object syndrome, right? Because in real estate, there's so many different ways to make money. And I think for a lot of people starting out, it's like, oh, I listened to Brandon's podcast and I think it's going to be Burr. And I listened to Cam and I'm like, I'm going to flip, right? So earlier on to kind of define what that is. And I feel like it's understanding your personality, what are my strengths and how does that play out in the real estate realm to kind of determine what type of investment strategy makes best sense for me.
Cam, what do you think on that?
I think it all comes down to kind of what he said, having a core focus. I think that's the most important thing when you're starting in real estate, is having a core focus. Because just relating it to working out, if you don't have a core focus of, hey, I want to train to get strong, or I'm going to train to be a marathon runner, those workout plans are so different. They're so vastly different. And it's the same, like, if you don't have a core focus where it's, hey, I'm buying single-family rentals, or I'm buying single-family houses to flip, or I'm buying houses to do Section 8 rentals on. If you don't have a core focus, you don't have a strategy to get there. And so I think the most important thing is having a core focus when you start. And I also think, like going along with what you said, one of my favorite things, and I don't know who said it, I think it was on a podcast that you did, where the guy was talking about the hardest thing about real estate investing. And, it's like, it's not finding money, it's not finding deals, it's not X, Y, or Z. The hardest thing is there's too many ways to make a lot of money. And I think, so then because of that, people get shiny object syndrome and they want to jump all over the place. And if you're trying to jump from being a bodybuilder to a marathon runner, you're never going to achieve either of those. And so I think having a core focus is the most important part when
That's
you
really
start
good.
that. Yeah.
And I think that applies to any area of your life, right? Like fitness or marriage, or like, what does a 10 out of 10 look like? I love that question.
Yeah.
It's like, what does a 10 out of 10 actually look like? And if you can't answer that, then like, where are you going? It's like the Cheshire Cat, Alice in Wonderland thing, right? Where she's like, I don't know where to go. And he's like, well, where do you want to go? And he's like, and she's like, I don't know. And he's like, well, that doesn't matter. Like, so like, if it does matter, so like, I even like, I'll even show you guys this for those watching on YouTube, you may be able to see it. Like, I even took this so far as to like, for my fitness this year, and for my, like, we do a thing in the Better Life Tribe called the like meeting your future self. It's based on the idea of future self from Dr. Ben Hardy, but it's like one of the segments of the tribe where we say like get really clear on who it is you want to be. So I actually used Discord and Midjourney. So Midjourney is the AI art thing, and I just messed around for a long time to find a body type that I want to someday look like, and I drew it out. Let's see if I can find it real quick. I'm gonna pull it up here.
I want to see
Propose
this.
it. I want to
your-
do that with the Brad Pitt Vanity Fair cover.
Exactly,
yeah,
you wanna look like
my
that.
face on there.
Yeah, where do I find this? Let's see, goals.
So it's your face on some
It's
of
no,
the
I didn't even put my
AI
face.
body?
I like wrote like bearded guy. Let me see. It's gotta. I'm gonna find it. Hold on. Keep talking amongst yourselves while I pull this up. We got content. I know it's here. Oh, goal set.
There we go.
Let's say that one. There it is. So this right here, for those who can kind of see, I don't know which camera is actually here doing it, but like that is like I said. If I could pick the 10 out of 10 body type, that's who it would be. And so then I wrote down a bunch of words that like, what does that mean to me? Like the 5-year future me. What is 10 out of 10 Brandon? I wrote like strong, kind, direct and bold, intentional, passionate. I wrote $1 million a month in passive income. I wrote collaborating with guys like Tim Ferriss, Patrick Bet-David, James Clear, Mel Robbins, etc. Incredibly confident and self-assured. So, and this is like, I have a list of like 30 things here, probably 40 things, 6 books written, 6 more books written, including 2 New York Times bestsellers. Like I wrote all that in here. So now the more I look at this and I'm like, this is who I'm going to be. Now I can design a workout. I can design everything that I do is based on future me. That's what 10 out of 10 is.
And here's the question I think you want to ask. I'm obsessed with this question, so this is a good time
please.
to bring it in. So once you figure out, that's an amazing thing. I would actually go a step further and superimpose Photoshop your
my
actual
face,
your face.
I feel like bearded guy. But,
Yeah. So bearded guy. So if you can superimpose, but once you figure out exactly, that's so much detail. It's amazing. Then you got to ask yourself the question: who do I need to become?
Yes, exactly.
In order to be that person. Like what habits?
What does that guy do?
Exactly.
Yes.
Like what books do I need to read? What skills do I need to develop? What mentors and coaches do I need to get around me? What do I need to do? Who do I need to become?
How does that guy work out?
Right.
Like how does that guy show up for his family? Like what's he do when he gets home from work?
What are his habits?
Yeah, what are his habits?
Who is it? I think it's FM Alexander who has that great quote, which is people don't create their futures, they create their habits.
Yeah.
And their habits create their future. And that's exactly what you're trying to figure out. It's like what habits does that 10.0 version of yourself do? Does he get up in the morning? Does he get up at 4 a.m. or does he get up at noon? Like, what does he do? So
part of that led to my decision to stop drinking because I said, does that guy drink? And I'm like, I mean, he could definitely, but he probably doesn't. Like, he's probably like to get in that type of shape. I'm like, he probably doesn't. And so like, yeah, I'm really big on that idea. The Better Life Tribe, the theme of the Better Life Tribe, we say it over and over and over, is you get the results of what you repeatedly do.
Yeah.
So like in any area of your life, you get the results of what you want to do. So one thing we do on the show is different than a lot of shows is we spend 100% of the money coming in from ads. So all the revenue from the ads goes directly to a charity of your choosing. So we have a couple ads in this show. So we're going to give the money from each of them, one to Amanda's charity and one to Mauricio. So who are we supporting today on the show?
Wow. So my husband and I founded a nonprofit called Animals for Armed Forces.
I did not know that.
And
either. That's
because I
amazing.
don't do a good job of letting people know.
Clearly, Amanda, come on.
So, so we donate part of our profits in our firm Keystone CPA to it. Thank you for this. So our nonprofit, basically, we raise money and the funds are used to go to the animal shelters. And so a couple times a year, Memorial Day, Veterans Day, if you're part of the armed forces and you go to a local shelter that participates with us, you can adopt an animal and we pay for the underwriting fees.
That's awesome.
Yeah, all
Yeah,
that
very
stuff.
cool.
Yep.
I love it. What about you, Mauricio?
I talked to my wife before this, and it's stuff the Tim Tebow Foundation. I know he came over and got a chance to meet him at Better Life last time, which was amazing. But the work he's been doing with human trafficking is off the charts, and so
Love it.
want that to go there. And by the way, if you're looking to get the bearded brand, just talk to Tim. He can probably show you how to get there.
Dude, I stood next to him and I was like, man, I just want to look like Tim Tebow.
Yeah.
Like that guy. Hey, quick story for you. About 5 years ago, I went to a real estate event where I met a handful of incredible investors. 2 of them in particular, though, changed my life. Those 2 investors were Brian Murray, Ryan Murdoch. They're now partners with me at Open Door Capital, where we bought over $1 billion worth of real estate. Not a bad ROI for an event, right? Now, why do I share that? Because it's one of the most underutilized tools for real estate investors, events. You can't put a price tag on the relationships you build, new business partners you meet, the knowledge you gain. And that's why I'm excited to tell you about Better Life's REI Summit that I'm personally hosting on May 3rd through May 5th in Denver, Colorado. I'll be there along with a number of other speakers that you might recognize like Ken McElroy, David Green, AJ Osborne, Brian Murray, who I mentioned earlier, and more. The event's going to be the most actionable real estate event ever, with sessions being structured on a how-to basis, so you can walk away with actionable steps that you can actually implement in your business ASAP. Whether you're a new investor or a seasoned investor, the dual-track sessions ensure that you'll be in sessions relevant to your business and experience. If you're interested in learning more, check out reisummit2024.com. That's reisummit2024.com. Ticket prices are increasing soon, so register ASAP to lock in the lowest rate while you can. All right, you two, back to the podcast. So, I wanted to, kind of the goal of today's show, or one of the frameworks we wanted to kind of run, is this idea of scenario discussions around like, what should an investor do in XYZ scenarios? So we've got 6 different categories of investors. We have the newbie rental property investor, or I like to call them white belts. They got the white belts who have never done a rental property. They don't own any rentals. You've got the newbie flipper who's just looking to get into flipping or maybe wholesaling. Mm-hmm. You've got the seasoned rental property investor. They're a landlord. They own rental properties, maybe 2, maybe 10, maybe 100. And you've got the seasoned flippers who's got maybe doing multiple flips a year, maybe up to 100 a year like Cam here. Or you've got the passive investors who invest in syndications like my own, or maybe they invest in private lending like with Cam. Or you have the syndicators like myself who are just raising tons of money and then doing big stuff with it. So those are really 6 types of people. We got newbie rental, newbie flip, seasoned rental, seasoned flips, passive investors, and syndicators. So anybody listening should think, okay, yeah, I'm in that group. So what we want to do is go step by step through each of these and say, what should we be concerned about if we're in that category, especially from a tax standpoint and an attorney standpoint? Like, do we need an LLC? Do we need a C Corp? Do we need, what are we doing and why? Does that sound good, guys?
I love it.
Okay, well, why don't I kick us off with the newbie rental, and then I'll let you take the flip stuff, so that's your world. Cam, newbie rental property. So imagine somebody, they maybe have been listening to this podcast for years, even though I've only been around for 1 year.
Wait a minute.
Shut up. They want to get into real estate. They love the idea of financial freedom. They want to buy rental property. They just haven't pulled the trigger yet. Maybe they've got a decent job. Maybe they've got a crap job, whatever. What do they need to know? And maybe we'll start with the legal side. Everyone generally thinks go out and get an LLC. Is that the first thing they should do? They open up a business. What's the process?
Yeah, I think people overthink this a lot, right? They all they'll rush out. I think Cam, you and I were talking about this. But they'll rush out and put together some really complicated, structure or stuff. And when you're just starting out, you don't need all that stuff. I mean, in the book, I talk about sort of the 6 layers of asset protection. And this is obviously layer number 1, right? Which is just, you want to be protected. So once you do acquire the property, you want to have some sort of insurance, right? Because one of the issues with rental properties in general is that if something were to happen, if the tenant slips and falls or a boiler explodes or some damage happens to that property, then you as the owner have unlimited exposure. Mm-hmm. They could sue you for $1 billion.
Yeah. And
you're like, well, I don't have anything. You're like, oh, I just have a W-2 job. I don't have anything. So who cares? Well, what you do have is future earning power. And they can always attach your future earning power. So even if you don't have the assets now, it's I don't have any assets. Well, you have the property, number 1, but more importantly, you have the ability to go make more money in the future and acquire more assets in the future in the property. So you always want to start with having some sort of an insurance policy. I have my major issues with insurance. Everybody's like, oh, just get insurance. That's all you need. I would disagree with that because, first of all, a lot of people are making their monthly premium payments thinking they're insured, and it turns out they're not insured, and they don't find out until they actually make a claim because insurance policies have exclusions. So there's always exclusions. I'm actually in the middle of reading a book, and he had this exact same story where I think he bought an engagement ring, and he got it insured, and he got a special insurance policy that was going to pay him if he lost that ring for the appraised value at the time. He bought all the riders. He's making all of his monthly premium payments. And then, unfortunately, he did end up losing the ring. And then when it's time to go to collect on the insurance policy, like, oh, well, that's not the way it's written. You only get, current appraised value, 60%. And it turns out the exclusions in the policy. So that's a big, it's a big thing. Many people are underinsured. Like they have $1 million policy, and that sounds like a lot, or $500,000 policy. But, litigation can get expensive. That thing can be eaten up in legal fees, and sometimes the judgment is much higher, and your insurance just isn't covered. So bottom line is insurance isn't enough. So you want a backstop, even if you're a newbie. So at a minimum, first layer, insurance, but then you want to have the backstop, which is what the LLCs. If the insurance policy, for whatever reason, doesn't cover you, undercovers you, isn't there, you want to have a backstop, and that backstop is the LLC, and that's just something that you would create. Again, don't get too fancy. Create that in the state where the property is located, and that's going to be your first layer.
Does the LLC come first? Does the property purchase come first? What are your thoughts?
Property. So most of the time, from a legal perspective, a bank or a lender is not going to lend to an LLC. They're going to lend to you in your personal name because you're the one that has the credit, their income. People think that you're just going to create a brand new entity and suddenly it's going to have all this credit and credit worthiness. Like it's brand new. It has no income. I
see TikTok videos sometimes. Just open up an LLC and go get a bank loan on it for $200,000.
By 5 p.m.
Exactly.
Yeah. Would you loan somebody some LLC that just got created this morning? Of course not. And so banks aren't stupid. They're not going to do that. And so what generally happens is you close on the property in your personal name. Then after maybe 30 days or something, you create the LLC, which shouldn't take you that long. LLC, again, don't get super complicated. It takes maybe a week to set up, and it's not super expensive. And then you would transfer the property for asset protection purposes from your personal name into the name of the LLC to get that asset protection.
Can I ask a quick tax question on that transfer? So if you're doing like for your first rental and you are doing the BRRRR method, let's say, and so you close on that in your personal name, you're fixing it up, you quit claim it over into your LLC, is there, because you bought it at $70,000 and now you fix it up, it's worth $150,000, is there a tax liability on that?
Not usually.
Not usually.
Yeah,
okay.
because in most scenarios, you're going to be a 100% owner of the LLC. So for tax purposes, it's still the same owner. There could be fees, of course, like whenever you transfer title, there could be fees at the county. Usually, they're not very high. There's some specific counties that are a little bit higher, but usually that's not a tax problem. And that's one of the reasons, if you are going to have an entity for liability protection purposes, we typically recommend an LLC from a tax side. And the reason is especially for this, is you can easily transfer title in and out. So it's not uncommon, if you mentioned the BRRRR strategy, after I rehab it, I'm going to refinance. Well, sometimes they won't refi in the name of the entity. So I still have to be on that the loan. So at some point you might have to move it out of the LLC to do the refi to pull the cash out. So
sometimes the banks want a seasoning period there too. So you can't just take
it
out.
You
can't just go back and forth whenever you want. Like the bank wants to see 6 months to 12 months sometimes. So usually when I do a BRRRR, I will buy it in my personal name. I will then wait until the rehab's done. I'll refinance it. And once the refinance is done, the permanent financing, that's when I put it in the LLC. Now, that doesn't mean a year of risk where there's no LLC, but that's the game you got to play sometimes.
And the nice thing about an LLC is that it's got the flexibility to have it taxed however you want. I mean, obviously, if it's just you, it's going to be disregarded, but you can have those taxed, correct me if I'm wrong, Amanda, as a partnership, as an S Corp. So you can have an LLC taxed as a C Corp. And I'm not saying you want to do that for this purpose, but it's just so flexible, and it has the best asset protection of all of the entities. You don't want to be owning a corporation and have, trying to rely on a corporate structure for asset protection. It's terrible, which is why I generally don't like S Corps in general, because people set up corporations and they just don't give you the protection. LLC has the best of both worlds. You get the asset protection, you get the limited liability, and then you get the option to tax it however Amanda tells you to tax it.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest mistakes I see when it comes to newbie investors and entity formation is like what you said, people make it too complicated. And I think that's further complicated by just bad legal and tax advice on social media, or just bad actors out there who are trying to tell people to sell a $7,000 or $30,000 package, right? Where every investor must have a bunch of LLCs with a C Corp and a management company and a nonprofit. And although that might be great for Robert Kiyosaki or Brandon Turner, but that might not be the best for a newbie investor. Because sometimes when those people come to me, like, hey, I got 7 entities here. Well, guess what? It's very expensive to file tax returns to pay the state. To pay the state, and to find out like, oh, well, it doesn't actually own any properties, right? And now you spent $30,000 on entity formation. You no longer have money to do that BRRRR deal. So something to watch out for.
And if you are going to, this is a big mistake I see all the time too. If you're going to set up an LLC, right? you've got to transfer the property into the LLC. A lot of people forget to do that part, and so they create the LLC.
Never done that.
You're making Brandon uncomfortable.
I'm sorry, I wasn't thinking of you specifically, but people set up an LLC and it just sits there and they never actually transfer it. You've got to transfer
I've done
the
that so
property
many
in
times,
there.
man. So many times.
Yeah.
Amanda, do you remember back? I'm sure you do remember. Early on, I set up an LLC, and it was a partnership LLC with somebody else. Was it my in-laws, maybe, or my parents? I don't know. Or maybe it was me and Heather. But what was the rule? Like, you have to then file, if it's a partnership one, you have to file a business return on that, even if it's just. Was it even just me and Heather, or did it have to have another?
It wasn't you and Heather. I think it was you and somebody else.
I think it was me and my
or partner.
Oh
or
yeah, it was my business partner. We bought one rental together.
Yeah.
We never transferred it into that LLC.
Right.
We just had this LLC, and then I just kind of forgot about it. Just every year I just pay the money to keep it because I thought I would eventually use it.
Yep.
I never filed a.
Yeah.
Can you explain what was my problem there? What did I screw up on?
Yeah, people do that all the time, right? They're like, have an entity. I never used it, so I don't even think about taxes.
Yeah.
It's just there, and also it's protecting my assets because I have an LLC.
Yeah,
that's
of course.
magic. And we do see that a lot. And so the issue is, if you have an entity that's a partnership, you and somebody else, the IRS does require an entity return. It's a business, right? It's you and somebody else doing business, and so at a minimum, you should be filing a no activity return. Should be pretty cheap to do, but nonetheless, you file it. The reason it's a big exposure is if you don't file it, then you're paying penalties on each partner. So if there's two partners, I think at the time it was like $125 per month per partner.
Yep.
You imagine we have 4 partners, it gets higher and higher. So
Yeah, that was us. I think we went 5 years of 4 partners that we got hit with that. And I don't remember whatever that number is, 100 and whatever times 4 times 12 times 5. It was a lot of money.
Yeah.
And it was which I remember it was 20, I don't know, 20 grand, something like that, I don't know, give or take. And I had no money then. Like, I mean, I was real, like, I was like 27. I had no money, and it was also this huge tax hit.
Yeah.
And you saved me, though. You wrote a letter.
We resolved the issue.
It.
Yeah,
Yep.
we resolved the issue. But I think the big piece of it, I think for you at least, was a big learning experience,
Huge,
right?
yeah.
Like, we don't just go out and form entities on LegalZoom because Mauricio said it was really great to do it. We had to figure out, did it make sense for Brandon? And I always tell clients, entity formation is like anything in real estate. It's always a cost-benefit decision. Before you form an entity, before you do anything, understand what is the cost for you, not just to form it, but to maintain it, file tax returns, pay the state, and all that bookkeeping too. Right?
And what's the cost of not doing it right? I mean, you might save a couple bucks on the front end, but that's one of my biggest pet peeves. A lot of people waste legal fees on the back end because they didn't do it on right, whether it's this or whether it's having an attorney draft an agreement or something, and then you save a few bucks on the front end, but then when there's actually a dispute later on, then you're like, oh crap, and then you end up spending thousands of dollars. So yes, LLCs, you want to make sure that you're talking to somebody who's a specialist in setting up LLCs, and then you always want to be connecting with your CPA. LLC structuring is a little bit more flexible than taxing. So what I generally do is we create a structure, we'll send it to Amanda. Amanda will review it, and she'll be like, well, from a tax perspective, XYZ, we can then try and get more creative if we need to. But I know we're getting ahead of ourselves because we're getting ahead of ourselves since we're just doing, the newbie investor. But it's just the importance of doing it right on the front end, and don't just file it wherever the TikTok guy said, because then it ends up costing you more on the back end.
Well, so let me ask this question, then maybe we can move on to the flipper side. But when does a newbie, when should they even contact you two? People like you. Like if you're just trying to buy your first deal, maybe it's a house hack. Like, do you need to contact an attorney and a CPA first and set up meetings? I feel like you're going to spend more than all the cash flow you're going to get from that property. Or is that's just the game?
No, I mean, I think if you're just buying your first rental property, first of all, a lot of the rental agreements are state specific, and they're already pre-drafted by the state, and so you generally don't have an attorney negotiate the purchase and sale agreement on a single-family home. So I don't think you need that. But at some point, and again, it doesn't have to be a law firm either. I mean, you can just go out to somebody who knows how to set up entities. But that's not where I would start. I would start with putting in offers, figuring out what you're going to do, close on the property, and then talk to your CPA and say, hey, I'm thinking about setting up an LLC. Where should I set up the LLC? Who should manage the LLC? Who should own the LLC? Should I get a registered agent? What's the address? Like all those questions, that's when you would talk to somebody. But it doesn't have to be an attorney that's charging you $200, $300, $400 an hour. It could just be, a company that specializes in that, and you can get these things done for less than $1,000.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, cool. I think it's just getting the best advice that you can afford, right? Mm-hmm. And that answer will be different for everyone. It could be your first single-family investment property, but you're someone with a lot of net worth from your job or from your other assets. Then I would try to hire good people on your team earlier on. I also look at how quickly you want to scale. So if you're like, hey, I'm going to buy one single family and then I might not buy any more for a couple of years, then you might not need as advanced of strategy. But if you're like, hey, I'm in it, I'm going to scale big, I'm going to scale quickly, then the sooner you have better advisors, the better it is. Because oftentimes, especially with entities, if you don't do it correctly, sometimes it's very costly or even impossible to fix. And I've seen that with clients, unfortunately, where we just have to miss out on tax benefits because it's too costly for us to fix that.
And that's such a great point because I was thinking more like a newbie, like I'm literally just I'm a young person, I've got a W-2 job, and this is my first product. But you could be a high net worth individual who's high paying
newbie,
job,
yeah.
who owns all these businesses, and this is the first rental property they bought, but they've got a huge estate to protect. And obviously, if that's the case, then yes, you should be reaching out to your attorney and really having an asset protection plan. That's where you get to the point where a structure makes more sense because you've got things to lose. What I was thinking originally was like you just have a W-2 job or you're just buying your first one. But the more resources you have, the more it's called an estate. The more assets you have to protect, then you've got to take this more seriously and spend a little bit more money on it.
Love it.
Sense.
So if you are not a newbie that's buying a rental property, but you are a newbie that's buying a house to flip. So scenario, let's say you're 28 years old. You have a W-2 job, you want to go full-time real estate. And the way to do that, because with rental properties, it takes a long time to go become an active real estate investor. So you want to flip properties. Your plan is to flip 5 properties and make $100,000 that year. What would you do, one, to set up the legal formation of that, and then also to protect yourself from paying, or save yourself from taxes or as much as possible?
So one thing we didn't mention earlier that I get a lot as a question for newbie investors is if I don't have an LLC, can I still write off my business expenses, right? So I just want to address that real quick. So regardless of whether you have your properties in an entity or not, you can always write off 99% of your business expenses. So the LLC is not a requirement for you to take tax deductions.
Okay, yeah.
The common things, right? Like, our home office, our car, we can write it off regardless of having an entity. So I always tell people, hey, if you're a new investor, you own rentals, I actually don't really care if you have an LLC or not. We're using the same write-off, same strategies. When it comes to fix and flip, though, there is a difference in the tax world because flip income is what we call active income. So almost the same as a W-2. Like you're working. It's not just investing, you're actually working. And so what that means is for taxes, not only do we pay federal and state income taxes, we also have to pay self-employment tax, which is when we pay into Medicare, Medicaid, so Social Security stuff. And so when you're flipping inside of an LLC, then we can choose how we want to pay taxes. So oftentimes, if you're someone, in your example, 28 years old, quit working, made $100,000 net flipping, if we tax that LLC as an S corp, we might save well over $7,000 in self-employment taxes just by making that one quick shift versus earning all that flip income in your personal name. So there's absolutely a tax benefit to having an LLC if we're talking about active income, whether it's flip, wholesale, commissions, all that kind of stuff.
Sorry, this is where we get to the point I made earlier. Like when you're talking about creating an S corp, really, I would be recommending to set up an LLC and making an S election, making it taxed as an S corp, but it's actually from a structural standpoint an LLC because you get the asset protection from the LLC that you don't get in an actual corporation.
Love it, because when you said that, I got worried because I think ours is, but I think ours is an LLC that is taxed as an S corp.
Yep.
Yeah, because there's actually not a thing as an S corp. Like legally, there's no S corp. You're either an LLC taxed as an S corp, or you're just a corporation taxed as an S corp.
Oh, interesting. I did not realize
Yeah,
that.
there is no S corp. That's why it drives me crazy. When it's like I'm just going to set up an S corp. Well, it's either an LLC as an S corp as an S or a corp as an S.
And I really love the LLC structure because in our example, this person made $100,000. That's great. So I can retroactively after the year's over, in December, I can say, hey, let's tax Cam's entity as an S corp.
You can choose that later.
We can choose that later.
Really?
Yeah. But if Cam didn't do as well, we only made $20,000, then I might say, let's just keep it as a LLC disregarded entity because I'm going to save a little bit of taxes, but I have to pay Amanda more money to file my S corp return and run payroll than I would save. So the LLC is so flexible; it allows us to look back and make changes, and just to be able to say, which one's better based on how much money I actually ended up making this year.
Cam, when you're flipping, for example, do you just flip them, or do you add a little value? Do you do a little value add? Do you have like contractors there? Are they working on the house?
Oh,
or do you
yeah.
literally, yeah, right?
Yeah, so we've got contractors, a ton of people in and out of the house. So like insurance, what are your thoughts on that?
That's what I was going to say. So think of that as well. So just because you're flipping, it doesn't necessarily differ from an asset protection standpoint if you're a buy and hold, because you may not have tenants. Actually, I know you don't have tenants in there, but you have contractors going in and out. So some guy's on the roof and he freaking slips and falls and breaks his neck, and it's like who's he going to sue? He's going to sue the owner of the property. That you don't want to be the owner of the property. You want the LLC to be the owner of the property, so you limit that liability to whatever's inside of that LLC. And again, insurance. And now insurance might be, and I'm not an insurance expert, but I mean, insurance might be a little bit different because it's not, general liability. It might be, some contractor insurance, whatever that looks like. But again, insurance is always your first line of defense. Then you have the LLC. Now, the real question, and this is where it'll just get, facts and circumstances for each person, is do you just have one? If you have one flip at a time, can you recycle the same LLC? Or should you be setting up a new LLC every time? And it's just a cost benefit analysis. Like, well, how much is it going to cost you to set up different LLCs? There is going to be a little bit of risk if there's just the tail risk that's going on. Even if there's like a construction defect and you sell the property and they want to come back and sue the owner, and or at a minimum, again, you're a first timer, newbie, insurance, LLC, and this time taxes and S corp.
Very cool. Anything else on the flip side for a newbie that they should be aware of before they get into flipping? Form that LLC maybe first, and then decide how to tax it later. Because you want to buy the property, I would assume. If you're flipping, you can buy it in an LLC because you're probably using hard money, like the Better Life Ref. BetterLifeRef.com. There's an ad. Is that an ad? That's an ad.
100%. If you were getting hard money and you can get the loan in the LLC, 100%. At that point, you do want to set up the LLC first and take title directly into the LLC. Yeah,
okay.
Sure.
I mean, the key is just to have the LLC earlier rather than later, because I also have clients who are new investors who say, hey, I flipped a property already, made $100,000, and you told me to form an S corp or LLC. I'm going to do it now. Well, that's going to be a problem because your LLC didn't exist at the time, right? So we cannot reasonably say that entity made the money on the Main Street flip when it didn't even exist when it was done. So the earlier you form it, the better it is.
Does it make sense to buy a property in your personal name to flip it, but then put it into the LLC, just like we would for a rental, or didn't that negate all the? I mean, it doesn't really negate the benefits of an LLC. Like, would somebody do that? Just in case the hard money lender was like, no, you have to be in your personal name. That's probably okay still.
I mean, no issue on the tax side, right?
Okay.
We're just looking at which entity is going to be on the HUD when you sell.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
who's going to report the tax.
Oh, okay.
Gotcha. I didn't know that.
Cool. All right. Well, moving on to the next one. Let's talk about seasoned rental property investors. So people that are doing lots of rentals. Could be 3, could be 10, could be 100. What do we have to know we'll start with the legal side. Is how would you help a client, or let's say, how do you help me? I mean, I'm kind of on the syndicator side now, but like, how did we start?
Yeah, so if you have multiple, then you get into the issue of, you probably need more than one LLC, right? So you need multiple LLCs. Now that's another question you're going to talk about. It's like, well, how many properties are you going to put into each LLC? But let's just say you have 10 properties. Do you create 10 LLCs and one property LLC? Do you create 3 LLCs and all that? So that's a discussion you want to have with your attorney. It really has to do with what your level of comfort is of how much you're willing to lose, because everything inside one LLC. If you have 3 properties in one LLC and something happens to property number 1, property number 2 and property number 3 are going to be exposed because they're all inside that one LLC. So it just depends. I mean, if you've got $100,000 in equity in those 3 and you're a multimillionaire and it's not a big deal, then maybe you have it 1. If you have $1 million between those 3 properties and that's a lot of money for you, then maybe you want to separate those into 3 separate LLC. Again, it's always like a risk reward. How much does it cost to set up the LLC? How much does it cost to do the whatever additional tax planning is versus the reward, which is the liability stuff. But you would end up with multiple multiple LLCs owning the properties, and then you probably introduce a concept called the holding company is what I would think would happen. Actually, if you've got partners from a tax perspective, I think you save some, not to take business away from you, Amanda, but it saves you on the tax filing. But you should probably create what we call a holding company, which is an LLC that actually will own all of those property LLCs.
Why would we do that?
The reason you want to do that is because when you're doing your entity structuring, there's 2 things that you generally, especially when you're at this level, 2 things you're worried about. One is what we call an inside attack, meaning something happens to that property. A tenant, we talked about earlier, tenant slips and fall, the boiler explodes, there's a contract dispute with a tenant, something that's related to the property, we want to make sure that we have an LLC that limits your exposure to whatever's inside that LLC. So honestly, any of those LLCs, any state will probably cover you for that. But the other thing that most people forget about is, well, what happens if something happens to me unrelated to my property? I get into a car accident. I get into a business dispute. I get sued for some other reason, and now there's a judgment against Cam, personally, for $1 million. Now the question is going to be like, hey, what does Cam own that I can go and attach and collect on my $1 million judgment, right? And so at that point, you want to be able to say, hey, I definitely don't own the properties, but I own an LLC, right? Well, depending on what state the LLC is in may determine whether you're going to be successful or not in fighting off a claim. So you always want to have an LLC in that case in a state that has the best asset protection laws around. This is why you hear the Wyomings of the world, the Nevadas of the world, the Delawares of the world, and just recently the Texases.
Really?
Texas. The Texas just passed a law in September that kind of elevates it now to the same status as the guys. So generally you want to have, I like Wyoming just because it's simple, it's private and everything. So generally you would have a Wyoming LLC that would then own all of your property LLCs, and those property LLCs are generally created in the state where the property is located. That way you have the inside attack, right? You're going to limit your exposure to whatever's in that first LLC, and if you get an outside attack, what's going to happen is that the person, let's say I have $1 million judgment against you, I won't be able to take your shares or interest in the LLC. I won't be able to take control of that LLC. I'll just be limited to whatever distributions you would be giving yourself. And what you generally, so that's called the charging order, which is what you want. And then what you end up doing is just stopping those distributions, and that really frustrates the creditor who has $1 million, and they want to end up settling because they can't get to anything.
So practically, for a second, let's say that you talk to somebody, and they have 53 rental properties. 2 of them are Airbnbs, and they're held in separate LLCs. The other 51, that the person that you're talking to, this stuff hurts his head, and so he just put his head down and ran 100 miles an hour and just bought a bunch of properties, and they're all sitting in one LLC.
Yeah, great.
And the reason for that is because he did talk to an attorney at one point, and he said put them all in separate LLCs, but then you'd have to have different bank accounts, 100%. And he said you'd have to have different credit cards because any good attorney would tie them all together if you didn't, and he got stressed out and cried in his car and decided they're all going to stay under one LLC.
Yeah.
What would you tell that person to do?
Well, it's certainly the easiest route, but that doesn't mean you're protected. So yes, you want to have, if you're doing separate LLCs, you are absolutely going to have separate EINs for each of those. You're going to have separate bank accounts. You're going to want to show the world that these are separate entities, so that if something were to happen to property number 48, the exposure is limited to property 48. Whatever equity you have in that property, which I don't know what the numbers are, but it's whatever that is, 50 grand, 100 grand, 20 grand, whatever it is, that's it. The way this person has it structured right now is that if something were to happen to one of those properties, all of the other properties are exposed, meaning I'm going to get a judgment against the LLC, because that's the owner, and now I'm going to be like, all right, what does this LLC own? Ooh, it owns 47 properties that has all of this equity in it. Let's go after those, because now I own the LLC. Like I'm suing the LLC. The LLC actually has assets. It has equity in the properties. It's got whatever bank accounts you have. It's also fair game. So yes, it's easier to put everything in one LLC, but you also have the exposure that if something were to happen to property one, all of the other the equity in the other properties can be taken away from you. So the question I would ask that person is, do you want that?
Yeah.
Do you want to have the ability for somebody to come, slip and fall, some tenant on property number one, have a $5 million judgment against you and not be limited to just the $50,000 equity, but now they're going to get the equity in all of them and you lose all of them.
Gotcha.
And I think I see that from, as a CPA, I see the practicality of it, right? Because you're like, my client will say this exact same thing. I talked to an attorney. They said to do 50 entities, and I'm not going to administer 50 bank accounts and all that stuff. So I feel like there's a fine line where you're comfortable. I mean, so I didn't mean you.
Yeah, it's not me.
That person.
Not talking about me.
That person's comfortable saying, okay, maybe it's not all 50 in one LLC, but maybe I'm doing 10 per LLC. That's more, agreeable. But on the
back
tax
in the day,
side,
I'd do like $1 million in each is what was kind of my rule of thumb. I mean, that's how I felt
If you're
comfortable.
Yeah.
So $1 million property value, which I was buying $100,000 properties, 100 to 150. So it's like 7 to 10 properties per thing.
And each client is an individual. That's why I hate these like one thing fits all. It's like each person has an individual risk profile. Somebody wants to be super conservative and they want to be able to sleep at night and not worry. Some people are like really aggressive and they want to, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I'm curious as to what you would advise this friend of yours who had this issue. What were you telling him? After he was crying and called you, what did you tell him?
Yeah, after he was crying and well, let's just say he still has all of them in one LLC.
Yeah.
So, but no,
Sounds
I
like he
think
needs to
it's-
hire Mauricio.
Yeah, it sounds
give a
like
bunch of
It's just a
LLCs.
risk reward. It's like your reward is that you
simplicity.
don't have to deal with it. You have one account. You don't have to 100 LLC, bank accounts, 100 EANs. When you talk to your CPA, you don't have to deal with it. That's the reward. The risk is all your properties are exposed to each other. So hopefully, which I know you do, I mean your friend does. Hopefully that there's an insurance policy there, which I know there is. I know there is. And look, and if you can get an umbrella policy, that's another thing I would try and max that out. But again, at a minimum, here's a good tip for you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for your friend. At
Yes,
a
for
minimum,
my friend.
I would hire an insurance attorney, an insurance counsel to review your policies and tell you where the holes are, if any.
I love
And that way, if you have holes in it, you can then have a discussion of, is there an additional policy to fill those holes? So the likelihood of that policy failing is diminished, but you're gonna have to spend a little bit of money up front, maybe $2,000 or $3,000, to have an attorney review that, an insurance, but there's attorneys that are specialized in insurance, have them review it and then give you an assessment as to this policy is great, it's worthless, here are all this is what it doesn't cover, which is what people don't know. Because even I have a hard time reading insurance policies. I mean, they've got exclusions, and I kind of joke where it's like, in paragraph 3, they put an exclusion, and then in paragraph 18, they take it out, but then in paragraph 73, they put it back in. And it's just really a convoluted document. It drives me crazy. So hiring an insurance counsel may be a solution for your friend.
Yeah, that's a great tip because I've actually fallen before in California, every entity is so expensive. So I was looking at insurance to, as a second layer of protection. And the person I talked to, the insurance specialist, told me everything was covered, including rental real estate. So what I did was I asked for the exclusions list. So I didn't read through any of the policy. I just looked at the exclusions. And one of the things that was excluded was my business. And my rentals. So, but it was like Mauricio said, you just add additional riders depending on what exactly it is that you want to cover.
And I talk about this in the book, but it depends on the agent too. Like there are some agents that work for the insurance company, and they actually have different fiduciary responsibilities than other independent agent. Like if you go to an independent agent, then they have a responsibility to make sure that you get the right policy. When you get certain types of insurance brokers that they work for the insurance company, their allegiance is the insurance company.
Oh, I never thought about that.
So are they going to be looking out for your? But now they have some duties, but it's not as it's a different duty than the independent insurance broker. So keep that in mind as well.
That's really good.
I think in addition to the asset protection benefit of having that holding structure at the top, it's also really important for tax purposes, especially if you are married and you live in a state that's not a community. So most states are separate property states, like Hawaii, for example. If, let's say, Brandon and Heather owned 50 rentals and 50 LLCs, that's 50 different tax returns we have to file. If you put that in a holding company, now everything flows up to the holding entity. So that's one tax return. So you can imagine the cost savings of having that additional layer where you're filing one return instead of 50 tax returns.
Brilliant. All right. Seasoned flipper. So somebody's doing 100 flips a year, 50 flips a year. We didn't cover that one yet, right?
No, we have not. Yeah.
All right. Well, I stole your thunder.
No, I love it. Yeah, so somebody's doing, let's say, 50 flips a year, and they're making $1 million a year off of those 50 flips. And you said something earlier that piqued my interest, where you're like, are you doing every one of those flips in a new LLC? Because if you sell the house, and there could be some liability there, like what are you doing? One, for protection on that, but then also if you're making $1 million a year, and you're self-employed, there's a huge tax burden with that. And so what are you doing to protect yourself and save as much tax as you can? Because we all want to keep as much money in our own pocket as we can. So what are you doing to do that?
From the tax side, I love people who flip because you are already in the business of real estate, right? So it's easier to become a real estate professional and really use rental losses to offset a lot of that income. I think the conversation for me with my flipper clients is always like, they want to sell quickly so that they can get the money and reinvest again. But if you can structure it in a way where you're flipping some, but you're also holding on to some of the other ones, even for a year or 2 years, now now you're in this wonderful world where you have a lot of income from your flips, but you also get a lot of depreciation through your rentals that they can offset each other and save on taxes that way. You know, when you look at it, fix and flip is you're paying taxes at your highest rate for federal, state, and also self-employment and payroll tax, right? So again, depending on $1 million in Hawaii, you're going to lose more than 50% of that to taxes. Alternatively, you know, on this property, if I was going to flip, I'll lose half of it to taxes. But if instead I held it as a rental for a year or 18 months, now not only do I not have to pay any taxes, I've also instead turned that money into depreciation that I can use. And eventually when I sell that property, now it's a rental that I'm selling, I can 1031 exchange and pay zero tax. So it's a huge difference of 50% or more versus maybe no tax.
Love it. So real quick, because I'm still relatively new to real estate. In my first year and a half, people would throw around the word depreciation, and I would smile and nod my head and act like I knew what it was about, and I did not. So for anybody listening to this, can you give what is depreciation?
Yeah, so depreciation, basically the IRS allows us to write off the purchase price of the building over time.
Even though you get a loan.
Yes, yeah. So the way they look at it is, hey, you got a building, there's wear and tear, right? So you're going to be able to write it off, that wear and tear. So they allow you to take the depreciation regardless of whether the property is going up in value or down in value, right? It's just the rule. You get to take depreciation. And irrespective of how much money you irrespective of how much cash you spend. So if we are talking about $1 million property, you get the same depreciation whether you put the $1 million down all cash or you did it with no money down. It's exactly the same. If $1 million is the building purchase price, that's what we get to write off. So it's really amazing, you know, when you hear people talk about, I think Robert Kiyosaki talks about this a lot, that his wealth was built on debt and taxes. This is exactly what he's talking about, right? Debt. Using the bank or investors' money to get that $1 million property, that turns into tax benefit of depreciation for you. We look at it as a paper loss, right? Because you're not actually losing money. You're just writing off that purchase price over time, and you can utilize that to offset the rental income you generate.
Hey, real quick, the Better Life podcast today is sponsored also by Open Door Capitals. And the reason I bring that up right now is because I actually have a free white paper that I wrote all about how the rich pay little to no taxes. It basically, everything Amanda just said, I outline a bunch of it in this white paper that you can look at, how like Donald Trump paid like $750 in tax the year he became president. I pay ridiculously nothing, pretty much, in taxes, despite making a ridiculously decent amount of money. And so if you want to learn how that works and how it works, whether you're an active investor, whether you're somebody like Cam, whether you're a syndicator, or whether you're a passive investor, that's right, we actually pass through a lot of the depreciation to investors. So you can learn how that all works by going to odcfund.com/tax. odcfund.com/tax, or by just going to Instagram and go to Beardy Brandon, shoot me a DM, and just use the word tax, TAX, and it'll automatically send you a copy of the white paper. I think you'll like it. All right. So depreciation, is that something everybody, Amanda, should do? If they own a bunch of rentals, even single family houses, we talk about a lot in the commercial world, but should they be doing it with single family houses?
For sure. Depreciation, I think, contrary to popular belief, you have to take depreciation. There are some really bad advice from CPAs who say, oh, don't take depreciation because you don't benefit from it. It's actually a requirement. So if you invest in real estate, you have to take depreciation on your rental properties. If you don't and you sell, the IRS is still going to calculate it as if you took depreciation. But beyond depreciation, right, there's this concept called cost segregation or accelerated depreciation. And that's where we say, okay, instead of writing off this building purchase price over multiple years, usually 27 and a half years, how can we tweak the number so we're writing off more earlier upfront rather than equally over 27 and a half years? And I think that's what you're referring to when people say, oh, the accelerated depreciation is only for commercial real estate, large properties, multifamily. But in fact, it's actually available for single families as well. We have a lot of clients in single family homes. Short-term rental space is a really, really great one. Because again, depreciation is looking at the purchase price of a property, not the size of a property. So we can have $1 million single family home that could yield you really, really great tax savings, right? So it's always, again, cost benefit. What is it going to cost me to do this accelerated depreciation, and how much am I actually going to save in taxes? That's how we make the decision on whether it makes sense to do it or not.
And I know we're going to talk about it a little bit later on the syndication, but this is the beauty of depreciation is if you're a passive investor investing in other people's, you actually get to benefit also from that, that depreciation. That depreciation flows through up to the owners, right? And so that's one of the nice things. I get that question all the time. It's like, well, if I'm a passive investor, am I going to get the same depreciation benefits? Like, yes, you are the owner of the LLC, and you're going to have that proportionate depreciation on your taxes as a passive investor.
Yeah, it's actually easier for passive investors too, right? Because all the tax strategies is done at the syndication level.
Yeah.
So you as a passive investor don't have to decide whether to do it, go out and get it done. You just getting a K1 with that tax benefit nicely wrapped in a bow, and then you get to utilize it.
Yeah, that's amazing. This also brings up a really important point here that I'll throw out here, is that when you're in real estate, especially at this level, we're talking about kind of this middle ground where like you're an active real estate investor or whatever, it's so important to get attorneys and CPAs who specialize in real estate investing, right? Because like, I mean, I hear it all the time, I'm sure you do too, where like a client will come to you, Amanda, and be like, yeah, like my last CPA said you can't do XYZ. And you're like, of course you can do XYZ. Or like, oh yeah, they said I can just take this thing. No, you can't take that thing. Because like the tax code is what, like 4 billion pages long. Like nobody can understand all of it.
Research shows.
Yeah. Studies show it's 4 billion pages long. So like knowing somebody like that's your area of focus, you're going to get way, way, way better advice by a real estate focused CPA than you are. Same with a real estate focused attorney.
It's the same thing. It's like the same thing as, the analogy I like to give is the medical profession. Like you have a general practitioner and they know a little bit about everything. But if you go into your general practitioner and you have a specific issue, they're going to send you the specialty. If you have a heart problem, they're going to send you a cardiologist. The cardiologist may know a little bit about, gastroenterology or whatever, but they are focused on a specific thing. And it's the same thing with CPAs. There are CPAs like Amanda who just know the tax code as it pertains to real estate. They don't have to go look it up. A lot of others that don't own real estate, actually probably one of the great questions to ask your CPA is like, do you own real estate? Because if they own real estate, they know that really well.
That's a great point.
Asking that question when you're interviewing CPAs is important. But like you said, there's I think it's 7,500, not quite 4 billion. It's 7,500 pages of taxes. But not all CPAs know that. Other CPAs might be expert in oil and gas provisions and all the tax benefits from oil and gas. Other ones might be, something else. So that's an important point.
Yeah. I mean, we work with investors a lot too who kind of real estate is their main wealth building vehicle, but that's not necessarily their business. So they might be like a doctor with a medical practice, but also doing real estate. So it's, like we can work with them in that, hey, we'll help you with the real estate side. How do you use real estate to offset your medical income? But you can always still retain, like, Mauricio said, that other specialist who deals with the medical side, right? Or whatever your other business is too.
Yeah, well, on a related question then, maybe it's a good time to talk about real estate professionals, right? At this level, if you're doing 100 flips a year, 50 flips a year, 20 flips a year, you're probably a real estate professional. If you're a landlord, you're probably one, but maybe not. If you have a full-time job, you might not be. So what is a real estate professional? Why is it important? How do you become one? And tell us all about it.
Yeah, so in the tax world, there's a set of rules called the passive activity loss rules. No one likes to talk about it because it's not sexy. It's not talking about paying no tax. It's the opposite. So basically that it says, hey, if real estate is your side gig, basically, and you make a lot of money, and they define a lot of money as over $150,000, right? If you make over $150,000 and real estate is not your main thing, and you have rental losses, then those losses are considered passive losses, which means that I can still use depreciation and all that to offset taxes on my rental income, right? But if I still have a loss after I've wiped out my rental income, I can't use it to offset my W-2 income or income from my business. Why? Because real estate is not my main thing. It's kind of like my side gig. So that's usually the standard rule, unless if you or your spouse is a real estate professional. So in other words, if you are a real estate professional, then your rental losses can offset all types of income, even though you're a high income earner. So if you're meeting someone who's a doctor who makes $500,000 a year and they said, I don't pay any taxes through rentals, that means very likely their spouse is a real estate professional.
Because if your spouse is, then you both are.
Then yes, if your spouse is, then you can use the rental losses against both of your income.
Yeah, which is why we're launching the new realestateprofessionallover.com, where it's a dating service.
Realestatematch.com.
Realestatematch.com, where we will hook you up with a real estate professional if you're a rich person, and you can now claim it as well, just for $10,997.
And if you're poor, and if you're a newbie real estate investor, now you can meet a rich doctor.
Exactly. That's exactly. We market to rich doctors. So this is
I'm an investor.
So Cam, both you and your wife are actively like full-time real estate.
Yes.
You guys are in it. It's stupid for you guys to still
What
be
are
married.
you gonna
You should
say? I knew that was
separate.
coming.
Go marry doctors each and have the doctors pay you like $100,000 a year. Because they'll
It's just a side hustle.
It's
Yeah.
just you guys can have a side hustle
It's
each to get
completely
married.
platonic. Wait, is that the right word?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. It's just a friendship.
You guys
You-
can
you-
remain
it's
friends with
platonic.
benefits.
Yeah, exactly.
Lexi and I.
You guys will
you
be
guys
friends
can
with
remain
benefits.
friends with benefits,
And then
but
the
then you go
marriage
marry.
The
is
marriage
platonic.
is just for real estate tax professional status
That's
for the
brilliant.
doctor.
And they
It's
just
a
have to pay
brilliant-
me 50% of
pay
the
you-
taxes they save.
Exactly. They pay you a
And it would
percentage
be
of the
a
taxes
lot.
saved.
We could
Is that
cost seg
legal?
some stuff.
Do you think that would be legal?
I
Would
thought
that
Mark
hold?
Cuban was investing in this. Is that
I
not-
think he is.
I thought he
think
was.
we were going to pitch
We
on Shark
were on
Tank
Shark
next week.
Tank last week.
Yeah, last week.
Yes.
Do you actually if that was a thing, if somebody paid a real estate professional to marry them just for the tax deduct now to be a real estate professional, and that doctor then, let's say it's a doctor or whatever, a lawyer making a ton of money, now they're a real estate pro and they're saving tons of money in taxes. Would that hold up in an audit? Like, how would they be able to? For what? How could they prove that you're not really in love with this person? Like, are they going to look at your house and say, "Oh, you weren't"?
I mean,
sleeping in
I
the
haven't
same
looked.
bed?
I'm not a tax attorney, so I'll make that disclaimer. But I mean, I don't know what is the requirement just that you have a marriage license, or is the requirement that you have to love each other?
Yeah,
do you have to live
No,
together?
that's
Do you
not
have
the
to? That's
thing.
not
I mean, the
Exactly,
IRS
yeah.
is not into marriage
Right.
counseling.
So all they care
right?
about
It's
is a piece of
legal-
paper. It's
yeah,
a legal
legal
document.
marriage. Right?
So
You're
how could
legally
they
married.
complain? Realestatematch.com.
I think you guys have to go home and talk to your wives, and then you will quickly see how viable this is.
Yes.
But
All right.
I think it's a brilliant idea.
It's a brilliant idea.
But the
Somebody's
reality
gonna do
is that
it.
more practically that when we see it in real life, it's more when one spouse is a high income earner, the other spouse is maybe a lower income earner or going to be a stay at home already, or someone working part time, where this works out really well. Because there are times when you run the numbers where, let's say you have the second spouse who's making less money. Net of taxes, right? Because now they quit working and they become a real estate professional. Now they can save a lot in taxes. Oftentimes, your take-home pay by quitting your job is going to be more than if you continue to have a dual W-2 earning income household. And we see this a lot where, one person's in real estate, the spouse is not really into real estate. So, we come in and show them the numbers, and now all of a sudden they're like, wait, maybe I don't love working at my job that much.
Yeah. So what if I want my wife to be a real estate professional, what does she got to do?
Okay. Well, first off, I think she is.
She is, but whatever. Let's just say she wasn't.
All right. So to be a real estate professional, there's 3 rules you have to meet. The first one is you have to spend at least 750 hours in real estate. And that could be anything. That could be flipping, wholesaling, dealing with rentals, 750 hours.
Be a real estate agent or no?
Real estate agent, anything real estate related, being a syndicator. The second one, which is the hardest for most people to meet, is you have to spend more time in real estate than your job. So if you have a full-time job at 2,000 hours a year, you have to now have more than 2,000 a year to be a real estate professional. So this is where it's like, hey, if you're working full-time job, it's almost impossible to do it unless you have, a bunch of rentals, also syndicating, that kind of stuff. So so those are the 2 rules. And the third rule is you have to meet material participation, which just means that out of those 700 or whatever hours you need, at least 500 of those have to be on rental properties that you own. So those are not flipping, right? Those are like your own rental property hours.
Love it. And so just to clarify, real estate professional, like for instance, Better Life. It's a real estate company. It teaches people how to invest in real estate. Is Matt Buck a real estate professional? Is
Because
that
he's in charge of it. Does education count?
So, so he would be in that scenario. We're looking at what are his hours in real estate, right? So if he's running a real estate company, that's real estate professional.
Even though it's a real estate
hours.
education company.
Yeah, it would still be real
That's
estate.
still-
Okay.
Okay.
But it's
But
not.
the issue. So, but does he meet all the other requirements? Which
Does he have
is
500 hours
real
of his-
estate?
yeah.
Yeah. Does he have 500 hours in rental properties? Is he spending more time in real estate than his job? Right.
Yeah, yeah.
So.
What if you go on a cruise, right? A real estate cruise, does that count as your hours?
Really great question. So you remember there's 3 tiers for the hours, right? When we talk about education and things like that, they can be part of general real estate, but they're not part of material participation. That 500-hour requirement we're talking about, those are property specific. So those are like you managing your properties, you dealing with tenants, doing like the day-to-day type of stuff. So in that sense, no, those types of education hours are not part of the 500 that you need to.
What if I come on a podcast and I talk about real estate. Is that
for like 700 hours?
Yeah.
So
Typical for Mauricio. It's pretty normal.
Yeah. So the question to you then is that specific to a rental property that you're managing hands-on?
Brandon, can you ask me a couple questions?
Yeah. Tell me about
Bro.
123 Main Street and why you love that property for the next 700 hours, please. Or 500 hours for that part.
I think the beauty of the tax code for real estate investors is that as investors, we can control what we do and to what extent. And usually what I find when clients are asking me these questions, like, how about this education or that trip? So what that leads me to believe is that you don't have enough hours, right? We're struggling. We're trying to get some, random hours here and there. But to do a better job would be to say, well, let me just spend more time on my properties. I can make them better. I can rehab it. I can, I can take it back and self-manage it and really try to earn those hours. Rather than trying to push through, education stuff, right? Because you don't want to have 500 education hours and then a couple hundred of real estate, actual real estate.
Yeah,
hours.
and that doesn't have to be spread out, right? You could do 500 hours in a very short amount of time, 10 weeks, let's say, 50 hours a week, right? Like one of my good friends had to go do that. He was like short. He's like, I'm not going to get material participation. So he went and moved into his rental, or he lived in an RV next to the rental, and then spent 10 weeks of 50-hour work weeks fixing that property up.
I might know this friend.
You might know this friend. This friend is not in the room, but and that gave them 500 hours though.
Yeah,
which
exactly.
was that 10 weeks of work or whatever that he spent there is going to save him probably, $1 million or whatever in taxes. So it was totally worth doing. Yeah. Can you give me another scenario maybe where this would make more... I don't want to say like why somebody would do this, but let's just say there's a doctor who makes $1 million a year. They also invest heavily in syndications, and so they're putting a ton of money into syndications. They want to stop paying taxes on the doctor money. So let's say the doctor is a woman, the husband now who's working at McDonald's making $12 an hour. What's a scenario like the husband then goes and gets self-manages a couple of Airbnbs, 10 hours a week? Over the course of a year, now that's 500 hours, and
so in that scenario, if a lot of their tax strategies are based upon syndications, then I wouldn't do Airbnb. We can talk about Airbnbs. That's a whole separate tax strategies.
Okay.
What would work in that scenario is if they bought a couple rental properties of their own and they and he self-managed those where he earns enough hours, because then we can make what's called a grouping election. So we can say, hey, we're grouping your rentals with all the syndication investments, and now you have all these losses. And together they can be used to offset taxes from the wife's medical income.
Okay.
So
do we combine husband and wife if the wife is doctor full time, husband is real estate professional, they're managing their own rentals.
Yeah. But
they only got 300 hours, but the husband or the wife in the evenings and weekends is working on the rental for 200 hours a year. Can we combine them into 500? Because he's still full time.
Yeah. So this is a little bit tricky. You can combine the hours for material participation. Okay. However, the husband alone has to meet 750 hours. Okay. Because there's different definitions because, IRS likes to make taxes hard. Of course. So to simplify, what I always tell clients is I want that one person to do everything for real estate. Because I want that one person alone to meet both tests, right? Because otherwise you have the husband doing some, the wife doing some, but then the husband has to still go out and get more hours because he still needs to meet that 750 test. Okay. So it's better to just say, let me have you be the lead on all real estate stuff. I don't want to take away from your real estate hours, basically.
Can you see how important it is to have a CPA that specializes in real estate? Like it's really weedy. Like it's like, oh, let me look into my library and tax code. No, she's got it off the top of her head.
Yeah, I love it. All right, well, we got to move on. We got a few more categories of people to cover. So we've talked about the newbie rental, the newbie flipper, the seasoned rental guy or gal, the seasoned flipper. Let's talk about, we kind of covered passive investors a little bit, but is there anything else we'll start with the legal side. From a legal standpoint, should a passive investor, they want to invest in an open door capital deal or a Cameron deal, whatever, are they going to get an LLC to do that, or are they just sending their money?
It depends, right? If this is the only investment they have, then it depends on the state where Open Door Capital would set up that property LLC. So if it's in a good state, a good asset, let's say you're buying a piece of property in Texas, and so you've created a Texas LLC to own the syndication, and I'm a limited partner in that Texas LLC. Well, again, Texas is pretty good, so I'm pretty protected. So even if I got sued from a car accident or whatever, and they came after me, probably have some charging order protection. But if that's in like, if you have an Atlanta property or something, so now you've got a Georgia LLC, which is horrible, or you're in California, now you wouldn't be caught dead in California. But a California LLC, then you probably want to start looking at, hey, maybe we should set up a Wyoming. Again, I like Wyoming, but whether, if you live in Texas, you should just set up now a Texas LLC. But Wyoming, Texas, Nevada, Delaware, that's where it starts to make more sense. But I think everybody at some point, if you're at this level, you probably have other assets, right? You probably have maybe a couple of other rental properties, and you have a passive investment, and you have stocks, and you have this, and you have that. So having a master kind of this holding company for the assets makes a ton of sense from the asset protection standpoint, but probably also from the tax perspective.
Very cool. Anything else on the passive investor side, Amanda, from you?
I think one of the common misconceptions people have is that as a passive investor, you don't get any tax benefits. I hear CPAs say this all the time. If you invest passively, that you don't get depreciation, which we already talked about. Or I think when they say that you're not getting tax benefits of investing passively, they're only taking a tunnel vision at assuming you're not a real estate professional, assuming that you're only trying to offset W-2 income, right? But we have a lot of clients who do get a benefit from being a passive investor, even though they're not real estate professionals, because the passive losses can always offset passive income, right? So there's lots of other ways we generate passive income. Like if I invest in Open Door Capital, I got a loss, but I have a bunch of properties in California that are cash flow positive and have a lot of income coming through, those passive syndication losses can offset my rental income. Or if I sold another property for a gain, I can use the losses to offset that too. Speaking of doctors, we have a lot of clients who are doctors, and they invest in other medical centers, surgery centers that kick off passive income too. And so there's absolutely benefit in being a passive investor. So don't fall victim when you hear like, oh, there's no benefit to being a passive investor unless you own your own single family homes.
It'd be a cool idea for like a lead gen piece for you to like put out there on the internet. Would be like something like an actual like report or white paper called "Give This to Your CPA," and it's like here, this is what you need to give to your CPA. It'll explain everything because you're all morons. Like it's kind of a funny idea where people would they download that just to read it themselves.
Yeah.
So
Love
think
it.
about it. All right, before we get to syndicators, near-death experience. Let's interrupt this conversation.
Wow.
I want to know about. I know we're taking a hard right.
Wow, that is a hard right. A hard right.
Hard right.
Wow.
What's the story there, man?
Yeah, so that was like a syndication. So
Got to keep you on your toes, man.
Yeah, so
We're
I have
professionals here.
I have Crohn's disease. So I have a disease that's an autoimmune disease that kind of attacks my intestinal gut area, and it just kind of it actually gets confused and thinks all these natural bacteria is the enemy. So it just tends to interact. It's funny, when I was a kid, I rarely got sick, and I always used to joke that hey, when God was handing out immune systems, I was at the front of the line because I had such a great immune system. Now I know I just had an overactive immune system. So anyway, long story short is that I went in for kind of a routine, as much as a routine. They were actually going to do a resection. They were going to cut some intestines because there's been a lot of blockage, and so it was getting problematic. So they were just going to snip two ends of my intestines and reattach them to just get rid of that scarring tissue that was there, which is kind of causing a little bit of blockage, causing some pain. So I went in. It's arthroscopic. It's literally I was supposed to go in there, and I don't know if it was not the same day, but probably one or two. Arthroscopic is pretty non-invasive. But I went in there, they did the surgery, and I guess my intestines were so dilated, they were so stretched that when they did the surgery and reattached it, the staples didn't hold. And so the whole thing just erupted inside. And so it was July 4th. It was like 5 years ago, and it was the most excruciating pain I ever felt. I was like, I don't curse. I mean, I'm a pretty nice guy usually. And I'm like cussing at the nurse because the nurse is like, oh, it's just gas, whatever. I'm like, give me the effing morphine. I'm dying over here, right? And
you big baby.
Yeah, you big baby. I was so pissed. Finally, the doctor came and gave me the morphine, and I was fine. But they had to go in there and literally at that point just slice open and just get rid of all the gunk. And I was septic, so I don't remember much of this stuff. But my wife Heidi was telling me that the doctor said there's like a 35% chance of you not making it because of all that septic that was going in there, And they had to go in 3 different times because they kept going in and cleaning everything up, and then they do the CAT scan 5 or 6 days later. So they literally cut through the same incision like all this time. And it was brutal. I was in and out of the hospital. I was in the hospital nonstop, I think, for 2 months. And then for the next 6 to 8 months, I was in and out. It's always like you leave the hospital and you get an infection, you go back. I ended up having, I think, 10 procedures all in from the time that first one, the arthroscopic, to the one that I was done. And that was rough because I was a one-man show back then. It was just me. And so if you can imagine, like, my income went to zero because I was out for 6 to 8 months, and I was in the position where I was literally in the hospital, IVs popping in, and I was working on PPMs, man, because everybody was super understanding, but it's like, hey, I got a multi-million-dollar deal to close, and I was like trying to offload it to people, but it wasn't. So I was literally in the hospital, like banging out PPMs. But it was just a good lesson, because it's like just this idea of just being a single point failure. I mean, when I went through that, I got through it. Luckily, we got through it. Didn't really make it. Had some reserves, which is another good lesson to have. Always have some. They would say have 6 months worth of reserves. Probably a good idea. But what that taught me was, like, I didn't want to have that ever happen again. Like, I didn't want to put my family in that position and stuff. And so I made a decision at that point to just build a company, a real company, a self-sustaining company, so that if that ever happened again, if I got hit by a bus or that happened again, I would have somebody, I wouldn't have to worry about the firm, and it would handle itself. And so I look at it now as a blessing, because, had that not happened, I would probably still be a solopreneur. I'd still be busting my butt, trading time for dollars and working who knows how many hours and stuff, and just being miserable like most attorneys are. Yeah. Instead of building this self-sustaining company where now I've got somebody basically running the day-to-day, and I'm here talking to you guys.
Sounds like what you did is you kind of moved from, if you look at Kiyosaki's cash flow quadrant, you moved from like self-employed to business owner.
100%. Yeah. I mean, I do very little of the servicing now. I mean, I'm more now, sort of.
You're
like
not the one doing my personal. Oh my gosh, I'm so offended. I asked Amanda this question related to her husband Matt, but I'll ask you, where'd you meet your wife?
That's another great story. So I actually met my wife. It all comes back to this real estate guys thing. So I met my wife because
She's a real estate guy?
No, she's not a real estate guy.
Russ?
Thanks to the real estate guys, I've gotten to know all of the rich dad guys pretty well. And one of my dear friends now is Tom Wheelwright, who's rich dad CPA. And he connected me with some guys that ended up doing like a wedding in the Cook Islands, right? And so I barely know these guys. I just started working with them, and the guy calls me up and he's like, "Hey, you should come." I'm actually talking about work, and he's like, "Hey, you should come to my wedding. It's in the Cook Islands. It's gonna be amazing. There'll be 40 people there." It's like, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, it was literally my 40th birthday, and I had plans to go to Chile, and I had all this whole thing. Oh, thanks for the invite, man. I really appreciate it, but I got plans. It's my 40th, but thanks anyway. I really appreciate it. And then we continue our conversation, and then he comes back and says, "No, you really should come to my wedding. And he just pushed me on coming to his wedding. And I'm like, well, this is probably a good business decision. The new guys that I'm working with, Tom's going to be there. It's probably going to make sense for me to go to this wedding." And sure enough, I end up going for the wedding. Cook Islands, so it's like one flight a week back then anyway. So you have to fly out on a Saturday, and then you got to stay the whole week and then fly back. It's like a random island. It's called Atutaki, which is beautiful. It's like this turquoise water, whatever. And Heidi, my wife, was one of the bridesmaids at the wedding. I think most people were in the wedding, and there was only 5 people that were not in the wedding. Tom and I were one of them, or 2 of them. And so she was a bridesmaid, and the best thing I ever did is, like, I'm a procrastinator, and usually I would have waited to like the last minute to make a move or something, and then it would have been like, because I felt safe. And for whatever reason, I decided to make my move early on, like day one. Yeah. So we ended up spending like the entire, it's almost as a couple, we were there for the whole week, and it was just a magical experience, and we just really hit it off. And 10 years later, we're celebrating our 10-year anniversary here in a couple weeks, and two beautiful daughters, and it's just been amazing.
And I hear she was a beauty pageant person.
Yeah, I vision all this stuff, man. And so I always knew that I was going to marry like either, I don't know, like a model or an actress or just somebody like that. And yeah, she's a former Miss Illinois and was in Miss America. And so I actually just watched, that's one of the downsides of having somebody from Miss America. I'm stuck watching Miss America every year. That's what I do. But no,
does she yell at the TV like you yell at football?
No, but I'm usually there. Like I'm like, until one time I feel like I have permission to just kind of go, no. Oh, she's good. Oh, she's ugly. Like,
It's like I don't like that bikini. Let's look at the next one.
I think Miss Tennessee, and she's like, what do you think of Miss Tennessee? She's like, oh, she was good. She's good. And she comes through all this like, oh, she's a good interviewer and a good. And I'm like, who cares?
That's exactly what you're thinking.
Yeah. Awesome, man. All right. Well, question I'd love to ask people, and I'm going to ask Amanda after this one. But what do you love most about your wife?
Man, she is just the most. She's just, first of all, she's amazing, beautiful inside and outside. But she is like the nicest person in the world. She's so caring, so much patience, and she's just a beautiful soul. At the end of the day, that's what it is. She just has so much patience for me, and she's just like the best mother to our children. I mean, that's when I was visioning and looking for my future spouse, I was like, I'm looking for the mother of my children before I had kids. And she is exactly that. She is the mother of my children and just has just this amazing soul. It's just a tender and just love it to death.
Love it. Amanda, what do you love about Matt?
Oh man, there's so much, but I think one of my favorite attributes of him is he's just such a giving person. So when we met, at the time working in public accounting, very similar to what Mauricio described, but basically, 12, 15-hour work days. And then after that, people would just go out and drink, right, for happy hour. But he was the one guy that on the weekends, he actually adopted a teenager. So he was it's called CASA. I don't know if you guys have it here. So you basically adopt these underprivileged, like orphan kids, but they're older, and so his job was to be big brother to them and take them out to do fun stuff and then teach them how to apply for college and just teach them like financial sense. I just really love that about him. It just like showed a lot of character because most other guys at the time were not doing stuff like that.
Yeah.
So he's just very kind. And, I remember one day on our date, we were driving and there was a stray dog just running down the street and he just like pulled the car around, got out of the car, and started chasing after the dog. The dog kept running, of course, so we just had this chase scene with us and the dog on a date. I'm like, what is going on? And he just sat in the street for the longest time. So I sat with him. We just both sat in the street until the dog finally came to us, and then we drove it to the shelter. So I just love, his heart, like just very giving.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Love it.
Dude, I suddenly felt like I just started sweating. It's like, did the air get turned off?
Yeah. Ooh, he is a attractive man. All right. Moving on, we got one more category. We'll hit this one quick, obviously, because most of our listeners are obviously not at the syndicator level. But when we get to that level where we're buying large properties, big commercial properties, what do we got to know from a legal standpoint?
If you're raising capital from passive investors, then you got to understand that you're selling securities. Anytime you're taking money from passive investors where you're generating the returns, you're selling securities. And so at that point, I always tell people there's really only three things that you need to think about. Number one is you either have to register that security, that syndication with the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, which we never want to do, or we got to find an exemption to that registration, or it's illegal. Those are your three options. So we don't want to register because that's like going public, IPO, which we're not going to do. We definitely don't want to do anything illegal. So we're always looking for what's the right exemption, right? And there's a couple popular ones. Not to get in the weeds. I know, Open Door Capital, we use 506C, which allows Open Door Capital to advertise and basically market their securities through the internet, through events or whatever. And then you're just limited to accredited investors only. So if you're listening to this, I'm like, I'm not accredited. I want to invest with Open Door. That's why you can't, because the exemption doesn't allow you. Or the other popular is a 506B as in boy, which does allow you to take some non-accredited, but it prohibits you from advertising. So that doesn't really fit.
Which is why I chose a C.
Yeah.
I feel like Bs were way more popular.
Oh, between the two, 90% of those two will go to Bs and only 10%
Even
to
today,
Cs.
still?
Even today,
Really
still.
fascinating.
Because there's a verification process for if you're doing a C. So you not only have to, you can't just take their word for it. You got to take what's called reasonable steps to verify. Usually, an easy way to do that is to have the CPA over here verify, but a lot of CPAs just don't want that liability. So it's harder and harder and harder these days to get that verification. So then it's like, don't look at your tax returns, and just high net worth individuals, if they have a choice between those two, tend to like, I don't want to give you my tax returns and my financials. But if you have an audience, obviously like you do, or all of my clients that are have an audience, have a YouTube presence or a podcast or whatever, then it's a no-brainer to go 506C because you can advertise. You can scream from the top of the mountain, and you can take an ad out in the Super Bowl or the Goodyear blimp or whatever. So that works for that. But if you don't have that and you're just starting out and you're relying on friends and family, inevitably, Aunt Karen, Uncle Pete, they're gonna be non-accredited. So you're probably gonna get quote unquote stuck doing a 506B, which is great. You just can't advertise. So you really need to keep that to sort of friends and family and people you have a pre-existing relationship with.
Perfect. Amanda, anything to add on that one?
From the tax strategy side, syndications are the same as a single family investor, right? I mean, we're just talking about larger numbers. So I was taking depreciation on a $100,000 property. Now I have depreciation on $100 million property, right? So it's just the scale, but the strategies and the rules are all exactly the same. So it kind of makes our job, at least as CPAs, a little bit easier. I think one important thing for a syndicator to understand is, for the most part, you're wearing two hats. meaning we have two different types of income coming to the syndicator, right? So you're getting active income in the form of acquisition fees, asset management fees. That's very similar to what the flipper was doing.
Yep.
And so we have to have the right entity around it, like an S corp or something, to help minimize that self-employment tax. At the same time, we're also getting rental income or rental depreciation losses. And so we usually want to have those in separate entities because there's different tax treatments for those. So if you're a new syndicator starting out, that's why it's important to not just talk to the attorney, but also to the CPA too, because you want to make sure you preserve the tax benefit of depreciation, but also minimize the taxes on all that acquisition fee income that you're generating.
Yeah, I was going to say one of the biggest mistakes I see syndicators make is not coordinating with their CPA. Like we're the legal. I'm not a tax professional. I mean, I know enough to be dangerous, but I'm not your tax professional. And so we draft the operating agreements and all the legal documents so we're complying with securities laws and making sure we're doing that part right. But then, and we have a tax provision in there, but it's just vetted from our CPA firm, and it's kind of, I don't say generic, but it's a way of doing it. You want to show that operating agreement is at the very least that section of tax to your CPA so that they can give us feedback at the time that we're drafting it, not a year and a half later when we're finally filing the tax returns. And because what they're going to do is look at the operating agreement. It's like, wait a minute, Brandon, you told me XYZ. I'm looking at the operating agreement. It's not matching, and we've got a problem, right? And then to go back and have all the investors re-sign. So that's just a big mistake I see, is just not bringing in your CPA early in the process. A lot of people, honestly, don't even have CPAs at the time, especially new syndicators, which is a big problem. So find your CPA, call Amanda, and then make sure that she gets to see your operating agreement prior to you sending it to all your investors.
Awesome. Good tips, guys. Well, it is time to move on toward the end of the show, our last three segments. And the first one here is the 3, 2, 1 pivot. So the idea of a pivot is life is going one direction, and then something stops it and changes it just a little bit. And so we're going to talk about 3, 2, 1. 3 books that changed your life, 2 people that changed your life, and 1 quote. So why don't we start with Amanda? 3 books that changed the direction of your life. Pivot books.
Oh man, there's so many. I love so many books. I think I'll go with some recent ones. Atomic Habit was a really big one for me. I love how he broke it out into like small things, right? If you can't commit to working out an hour a day, commit to at least 10 minutes a day. So that was really good. A book that changed my life was my book. Yeah. Tax Strategy.
How did writing a book change your life?
Is that really shallow to say?
How did it change your life, actually? That's a good question, though.
I think I started writing my book because I was actually reading other CPA's books when I was on a cruise, and I practically fell asleep reading a tax book. And I just thought, as a CPA, if I'm super bored reading a tax book, how can I expect my clients to read a tax book and kind of get anything from it? So I decided I was going to write a book about taxes with almost no numbers, almost no tax jargon, no reference to the IRS code, and just filled with stories of client examples. And I think that changed my life because I get a lot of feedback from people who've read it and said, wow, this was actually interesting for me to read. I couldn't put down the book. And I think it really helped me accomplish my goal in doing that. Nice. And then, so many, I don't know what else. 4-Day Work Week. That was a really big one for me because I read that at the time we were starting out our firm.
Not 4-Hour Work Week?
I mean, 4 hours.
Oh, okay. Is that another book? Yeah.
Also the 4-Day Work Week.
I was going to say there probably is a book out there called 4-Day.
Yeah. The 4-Hour Work Week, it was when I was starting out our firm, and it really helped me to kind of build it from the start of hiring. I think like what you were saying, Mauricio, I think most CPAs are solopreneurs and they work themselves to death. And we hired our first person when we were not really making money because I was like, that's how you build a business from the very beginning.
Yeah. Awesome. Amazing. Mauricio.
Legal Strategies for Everyone by Mauricio Rauld. No, to me, it's really simple. So first, actually, there's a couple of them here on the desk. So first one, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, for sure. Not only for the content of the book, which is really contextual, and the mindset that it brought, but just the fact that book led to the events in my life that led me to the real estate guys, who then led me to Tom, who led me to my wife. And so like that, in terms of like a pivot in my life, that's a big one.
Have you ever told Kiyosaki that
I have?
He's the reason for your wife?
I don't know if I told him that, but I did. I gave my whole story, and he was in the audience. I've gotten to know Robert a little bit. I wouldn't say we're friends or anything. I mean, if I saw him, he would recognize me and say hi, which is nice. But yeah, I did get a chance to actually at the real estate guys like 6 60th birthday or something. I told my story, and he was there, and he was pretty pumped. So
awesome.
so Rich Dad Poor Dad. I can't imagine nobody's read it, but if you haven't, please pick up a copy of Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Do you know Ryan Murdoch still has not read Rich Dad
He
Poor Dad?
probably refuses though.
He
Because now it's
refuses.
like his thing.
Yep.
Like I will
Ryan
never
Murdoch
read that.
will
tie
not.
him up in a chair.
I know,
and
just
like,
Audible
and then
book it, like just put it on.
Audible.
That'd be so
Just-
funny.
Maybe we should do
Trap
that.
him in a chair and just put it on.
That sounds like
go on a boat
that's
or
like
something.
a Mr. Beast video.
Yeah,
we should
yeah.
be like, we should definitely.
Yeah,
Has
yeah.
you really not read it?
Yeah, never read it.
It was amazing.
Ryan's my business partner, everyone, by the way.
Does not
Opened-
surprise me.
Yeah, Open Door Capital with me. Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, he's a, what do you want to call that? Like a zagger. If everyone zigs, he zags. Yeah, he's like, who needs Rich Dad Poor Dad? I am the rich dad.
I am.
Then he travels the country in his van.
Yes, not kidding. I love Ryan.
Yeah, anyway.
Traction by Gino Wickman for sure. That I got that right after the surgery. I was just kind of again one man show, and so that really showed me, this is how you scale a business. You don't kill yourself, and it was just at the right point. So we implement a variation of it. We don't follow it to the T, but they have their EOS system, which we do. Yeah. And then the recent one, which you have here too, and it was a guest of your show, is Buy Back Your Time, Dan Martell. That's been a transformational book for me. It sounds like a time management book, but it's not. It's really a leadership book and how to scale your business, how to become a better leader, how to live a 10x life. So if you haven't read that book, I would highly, highly recommend it. But those are the three I think right now. The one thing was on my list. Dan, I think, kicked off the one thing was my other one there by Jay Papasan and Gary Keller. But anyway, those are my three.
Perfect.
Love it.
All right.
2 people that that you've met, that you've followed, that have changed your life. 2 pivot people. Amanda, let's start with you.
Me? People who've changed my life. My grandma was someone who changed my life. She was born in the 30s in China, back when, like women didn't go to school. When I was growing up, it was always grandma, like she'd take me to McDonald's, give me candy, unlimited video games. That's what I loved about her. But as I grew up, and especially when my dad got sick when he was in his early 50s and I started having to take care of him, was when I really got to know my grandma, because we became a team, me taking care of dad, her taking care of son. When I got to spend a lot of time with her and really got to know her as a person, and I realized that, I said earlier, I come from a family of entrepreneurs, was when I realized my grandma was actually a huge driving force in my grandpa's business.
That's awesome.
She really helped him to, he was the first to license Rolex watches to Taiwan, which was a big deal. She had her own bakery shop. She hired the first French baker to go to Taiwan and kind of start that whole movement. And just, seeing that side of her made me realize, hey, someone who didn't go to college, doesn't read or write, who can accomplish all that, that I can kind of do the same. So
That's
a
incredible.
later pivot, I just kind of had a very different relationship with her. Someone else who changed me, I think, perhaps to be my husband. I met him later in life, and I wasn't really I come from an entrepreneur family, so we're always about money. How do you make more money and keep more money and all that? But like I said, he's very kind and gentle, and so it really kind of brought out that side of me that I never knew existed. So I feel like with him, I'm always a better person for it.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
It's amazing.
This one's tough for me because it's there's no doubt that one of the individuals who had really changed the trajectory of my life is also not a very nice person. And so, but I mean, being born right before the coup in Chile, I mean, I've got to say that, the dictator who took over, Pinochet, I mean, he came in. It's a tough one because on the one hand, he created so much suffering and so much.
Yeah, we didn't say good people.
We didn't say good people. So he was such a horrible person, yet I believe that, well, obviously it changed the trajectory of my life, and I think for the better. Like if that hadn't happened, I'd still be in Chile, and I don't think I'd be living the type of life that I am living today. So even though it's a tough one to admit to, it's just a reality of it. And then I always struggle with that because if it wasn't for him killing all those people, I wouldn't have met my wife, or had my kids. So that's a tough one to grapple with. So that's one. And then we talked about Robert, but Kiyosaki has got to be the other one, because again, that later on in life made that fork in the road where I, had it not been for that book, I probably would still be working. And I worked at an amazing firm, by the way. I don't want to. My firm was awesome, but I'd be in those golden handcuffs. I'd be working my butt up. I'd be checking in on that security guard on Sundays. I'd be making a lot of money, but I'd have a mortgage and a car. I'd be stressed. I'd be working 100-hour weeks. And because of that book, it started the trajectory where I am now. So those are really two big pivot points, pivot people in my life.
Yeah, you mentioned the dictator there in Chile. There's a related story that 20 years ago, a little over 20 years ago, my wife's mom got diagnosed with cancer, like bad cancer, like given like I think it was 6 months to live, maybe a year. And so my wife delayed going to college so she could spend a year with her mom, delayed going to college by a year. Well, her mom ends up getting like miraculously healed. I mean, just like this crazy healing thing. And it was like all better. So Heather then goes to school a year later to the same year that I went. So you look at that and you're like, without cancer, like without the hell they went through that year, which was a terrible year, Rosie and Wilder wouldn't live today. Right. And it's like, it's how do you internalize that? You can't. But it's wild,
It's hard to grapple, and and I remember my dad would even he felt guilty because like, I pulled you from Chile and the family because obviously my grandparents, my cousins, and all that. I pulled you, and I've always felt bad. And I'm like, Dad, are you kidding me? Like I've got this amazing life. I'm living in one of the greatest countries ever. I don't feel that way at all. I feel blessed almost to be it. But when you look at why that happened, obviously don't wish that on anyone. So it's tough.
Yeah. All right. Pivot quote. What's a quote that has changed your life a little bit?
I don't know if this is a quote, but it's something that I say to myself a lot, which is take action in spite of fear. If you ask my husband, he'll tell you I'm afraid of so many different things, height, speed. But what a lot of people don't know is I actually have a really big fear of public speaking. And people don't know that because I speak a lot, right? People have heard me on stage, on podcasts all the time. But I have, like many people, I have a really big fear of public speaking. But I always talk myself into doing it every single time. And after I speak, after I come off stage, I just have the most amazing feeling of accomplishing something. And what I do is right after I come off stage, I start to plan for the next time I'm going to speak because I'm just on that adrenaline high. So I try to apply that to different aspects of my life. Whenever I'm fearful of something, whether it's a business decision, investment decision, about my marriage, I just try to tell myself, if you do it, then you'll just be so happy that you overcame this specific fear.
Awesome.
Love it. Well, I'm a big quotes guy, as anybody who follows me on Instagram, I post one every morning, so I'm big on that. But
you're on Instagram?
Dude, I only started really being on Instagram when I went to the Better Life because everybody there has, everybody in your world.
For your first post.
Yeah, and it was my first post. Now I had an account for a while, but that was really the first. So I've only been on it for 6 weeks or something, or 2 months. So anyway, I got to go with a Jim Rohn quote. He's like the OG of personal development. And I'll give you the quote and then I'll unpack it because it's kind of a handful. But Jim says that it's about success. He's like, success is the continual unfolding of the design of your own personal life and pulling it off. Success is the continual unfolding of the design of your own personal life and pulling it off, meaning that you are designing your life, right? Everybody thinks success is like a car, it's a Ferrari, it's this, it's that. Everybody has a different definition of success. And if you design it and then you unravel it and then pull it off, you're a smashing success. He always tells a story of like, if your goal in life is to retire at 60, move to the woods and live in a cabin and feed the squirrels, and you pull that off, you're a smashing success because that's what you wanted. That's what you designed, and that's what you ended up pulling off. So that's what I live by. I vision everything. I plan everything. I have goals for everything. And then I always feel good when I'm making progress. Like if I can just get better every day and making progression towards that worthy goal, that's when I'm the happiest.
Awesome, man. Love it. All right, next segment of the show is past, present, and future. So one question about the past, one about the present, one about the future. The first question, what is your advice to your younger self? Amanda?
Me.
What would you go back and tell your younger self?
Tell my younger self? I think I would say believe in yourself and what you can do. When I was growing up, I was really shy. So now that I'm also on social media, a lot of my friends from high school are really shocked. They're like, wow, Amanda, you were so quiet. Never knew you would be like this. I felt like that was always in me, but I just didn't have the confidence to be who I was. So that's what I would tell myself.
I love whenever I hear this question, I always like to joke. I'm like, look, let's be real. If I was going back to, I was just like, just buy Bitcoin. Whenever it comes out, when it comes out in 09, just get all live with your parents, live on the couch, save every dime you have, and when it comes out, buy it. No, I think if I could go back, I mean, I just really wish I'd started on the real estate path earlier. I mean, can you imagine if at the age of, let's say, even 25, right? If you just started buying one property every single year, just not worrying about where you are in the cycle, you just bought one, it goes up, you just buy it, it goes down, you go buy it. and you'd look back and you'd have, 30, 40 properties. Maybe you can 1031. But anyway, just, there's an old quote that says, don't wait to buy real estate, buy real estate and wait.
Yeah.
That's the advice I'd give myself.
Awesome.
Brandon came up with that quote.
I'm sure I did. I claim all quotes as myself. I'm like Abe Lincoln on the internet. All right. What's something you've done in the past year that's given you a better life? Could be a habit, a new action, a new purchase. There's something that's given you a better life in the last 12 months.
Well, I have to thank Better Life for this. So, as you know, Matt and I went to the Better Life marriage retreat last year in San Diego, which was we had to answer a list of like 50 very uncomfortable questions. We got into a fight, and then we had to go to a party with Brandon, a bunch of clients.
You got into a fight?
Yeah. A lot of people did.
A lot of people get. I got in a fight with Heather when we did those questions.
Really?
Yeah, it was very tough questions.
Yeah.
But again, acting in spite of fear, right? So we came out, we discussed all those things, and now one of our habits is every morning we go on a walk. So we wake up earlier. Unlike Mauricio walking on the beach, we just walk around our neighborhood, and that's sort of our time just to be together. And we just talk about whatever comes up. Like we don't have an agenda, just whatever's on our mind about the kids, about work, about us in general. So that's really been life-changing because I think we're both very busy. Even though we work together, we don't talk to each other during the day. So having that dedicated time every morning as a commitment, I think that's really helped change our life.
Love that. Love it, Amanda.
I love it too.
You got to top that, Mauricio.
Well, actually, it's going to be very similar, actually, because, I get up early, as you guys know, but I started probably about a year ago going on these morning walks on the beach for like an hour, hour and a half. And it's right at daybreak. Again, that's my favorite time. So depending on the time of year, that might be super early, like 5:30 on the beach. And sometimes right now it's about 6:15. But I've started my gratitude practice there. So I get there and I just as I'm stretching, get ready, I do my gratitude practice, which is not a
what is
complicated.
that? Explain
it's
that.
just gratitude practice is just thinking of all the things you're thankful for. Like for me, is having my health, having healthy kids and my wife, and just just the incredible life that I have. And I think it all just starts with that gratitude. And so I do that. Maybe 2 or 3 minutes as I'm stretching, and it's not hard because you're hearing the waves of the ocean, whatever. And then I walk, and I don't think I get a huge. It's not like I power walk or anything. Like I get a huge necessarily a workout of it, but for me, it's like meditation.
Yeah.
Brandon, you always told me I don't know if you still do it, but you used to get like massages once a week, and that was your way to get thinking. This is my. It's
been a while, but
it's
I
been
need
a
to
while.
get back
Yeah.
to that.
So I just first of all I get so much done because I'm like thinking.
Yeah.
I'm sometimes listening to podcasts, and that triggers things, and so then I'm just literally I got my phone. I'm working, and it's like it's just a way for me to dump all these ideas that I have, and it's just, and then of course you get all this energy throughout the rest of the day. So that's something I've done almost religiously now. I don't miss it at all. I mean, if it rains, sometimes I'll do the treadmill instead. But that's it's been a life changing. It's made getting up early sort of more worthwhile. I used to just get up early and waste the morning or something. But now I actually have a purpose in that, and that it's just a great walk that I do.
Love that. That's amazing. All right, and future you, what do you want your legacy to be? What do you want your legacy to be, Amanda?
Gosh, I don't know. I mean, obviously, I want to have just like, happy kids. I want them to grow up, having a happy life. I'm trying to figure out really like what my unique ability is and what my calling is. And I think I've come to the decision. It's not final yet, but I feel like one of my uniqueness is being able to change how people think and feel about taxes. So I hope that my legacy, at least from the business perspective, is that I'm able to impact people where they no longer have a negative relationship with taxes. Like they don't hear that word with dread and fear and all this negativity, but just really embrace it. Like it's something that we all have to deal with. It's something we all have to do, but just really understanding that there are things you can do to make it better, right? I mean, maybe even have it to help you build wealth.
Yeah.
So just being being able to impact more people to understand that message.
Love that. Love it.
Mauricio.
I don't know. Right now, like I honestly don't give a crap about anybody else, and so it's like all about my family, right?
Yeah.
So it's like literally, I want it like to your point, not only my kids but my grandkids. Like I want to make sure they have not only the financial. I want to obviously create some generational wealth for them, but also just instill the values of my kids and the kids' kids. But I do feel like that I should be doing a little bit more and not be so selfish as just doing with the kids. And I feel like, and I don't have the calling that I have yet, but I do have that urge. Like there's got to be. I'm going to do something more than that and leave a legacy for the community and for other things. I know there's a lot of stuff, but right now where I am today, I'm just like, how do I make, who do I need to become in order to make my family's life and, and friends are also, good friends, your chosen family is part of that. But I just want to make sure that they from generation to generation are taken care of from financial and also from the values that we want to instill in them.
Love that. So with it being your family, like, what do you want your kids to tell their grandkids about you?
Ooh, that's a tough one. But that's a great question. I mean, just somebody that was a family man, that's somebody that cared for the kids, that really wanted to spend a lot of time with them, which I do, and that I wanted to live sort of a balanced life, that it wasn't just all work. It was already I spent a lot of time. Like my kids, I think feel pretty. So I asked them the other day. It's like, hey, what can I do to improve to be a dad? That's a great question to ask your kids anyway. And they're like, oh, nothing. You're perfect or something. I'm like, oh, that was nice. Yeah. But just spending time with them and knowing that they matter and giving them the attention and just getting better every day. And hopefully I instill those values and that work ethic to my kids and they can instill to their grandkids. But that's a great question.
Love it. Amazing.
You're a worthy co-host.
You are a worthy co-host. Yeah. I agree, Cam. All right. Time for the wrap up. 2 more questions. Why don't you take the first one, Cam, and I'll close up shop.
Ooh. What are you guys excited about coming up in your life? I'm very excited. Well, I'm going to steal your thunder. I'm not going to steal it. What are you excited about coming up?
I'm also excited about your thunder.
Yes.
But we'll get there.
Am I going first?
Sure.
I'm really...
Because he already stole your thunder.
Guys, I'm sorry I did it. I was going to say it, and I was like, that's what he's going to be excited about.
No,
he doesn't care about his book.
I don't care about this thing. I'm actually, I'm actually pretty excited about... I'm going to go with the business side of it. You probably thought I was going to go family, but
I thought you were going to go book.
I thought you were going to go book too.
Oh,
that's what I was going to say.
I could talk about the book.
I'll say what I'm excited about after.
Are you excited about my book?
Are you excited about my book?
I am excited about my book, but what I'm really excited about, and I want to give credit to Dan here, because Dan became my coach after I wrote that book. But I was really a little bummed about the business. I was at a point last year where I was like, it's just a lot of work. I was neglecting my health. I was neglecting the family a little bit. I wasn't spending as much time with the family. And I just was like, do I want to keep doing this? Do I want to sell this thing? If I want to scale this thing, it means I got to spend more time in order to grow it. And I just didn't want to go there. And what I'm excited about, that thinking is completely shifted. So I'm like 180 now. And I realize that that's not the way it works. Not just because you scale something doesn't actually mean you work more. It actually means you work less. I think, Brandon, you've gotten this down dialed. And so I'm really pumped about scaling and growing the business because I'm finally excited about it, which I was kind of not last year. So that's really what I'm focused on, is to just get that to the next level. And I do think that's going to allow me to spend more time with the family and spend more time on my health, which is ultimately what I want to do. But I'm just pumped about it. I'm getting up every morning at that 4 a.m. and I'm just visioning and I'm mapping it all out and I'm pumped again, which is something I was pumped back in 19 and 20, and I kind of lost that for a couple of years, but now I'm really excited about it. Plus, I'm excited about the book, Legal Strategies for Everyone.
Me too. I cannot wait.
Where do people get that? Amazon?
Yeah, no, it's actually getting released next month. So if you go to legalstrategies.com, you can get info there, and it'll get released, I think, middle of March.
We'll probably make this episode come out around that date.
Yeah.
So it's probably out right now.
Yeah, if you go to legalstrategies.com, if it's already out, there'll be an Amazon link.
How did you get
or
that
Barnes
domain
& Noble.
name?
Yeah,
that's a great domain name. Legalstrategies.com.
GoDaddy?
Dude, did you have to pay a lot of money for that?
No, it was available.
What?
Yeah.
Really?
Wow.
Dude, that's like a $10,000 domain name.
Yeah.
Legalstrategiesforeveryone.com, yeah.
Oh, for everyone.com.
Yeah, I'm sorry, did I say legal strategies?
Yeah. You might have said legalstrategies.com.
I meant legal strategies for everyone.
Okay.
That's the name of the book. Legal strategies for
I was like, a 2-word domain name with the word
I'm
legal in
going
it?
to taxstrategies.com right now.
I would buy that for 10 grand. All right, anyway, okay.
Let's re-edit that. Yeah. Legalstrategiesforeveryone.com.
Perfect, man. Perfect. We ain't editing nothing. Amanda.
What am I excited about coming up? It's actually very similar to Mauricio. So
Legal strategies for everyone? Me too.
You're excited about growing my business?
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. So I also started on a journey to really scale our firm about a year and a half ago. And I've already seen the benefit of doing that. So one of my bucket list items was to go to Asia for a month with my kids. And we did that last summer. And they loved it. They absolutely loved it. And we wanted to spend Christmas in New York, which we did. And they loved it. So now I'm just super excited to plan out what we're going to be doing this summer. But it's as a result of scaling our business to allow us to do that, because I was always of the mind frame, like, I can't leave, who's better than me at doing it? I have to do it all. But now I'm just realizing there's actually people that I can teach to do it just the same, if not better. And it allows us to have more time with the kids. So I'm really excited about that.
I love to say that sometimes the easiest way out of your business is up. Like, right, instead of like most people want to go down, they want to decrease and do a smaller amount of business, to have less clients, buy less properties, whatever. But I really think like if you just scale up, you can get yourself out a lot easier because all of a sudden you have the efficiencies and to which to hire better people. So owning one Airbnb sucks. Owning 100 of them, not too hard. And that sounds like completely like that probably blows people's mind listening to this on social media. But like it's totally true because all of a sudden you have the resources to be able to have a team and you build wealth way faster while working a lot less hours. So that's more of a mindset issue than anything. It's like the way you approach your business from like, I have a whole framework around like DIY to, visionary basically. So anyway.
And actually we talked about that in one of, when I interviewed you. So if you want to see that DIY video, you can go to Mauricio Raúld's YouTube channel because I have the DIY mindset that you did. It was amazing.
Wow. I had a little triangle. Yeah.
You mapped it out. It was great.
I mapped it all out for you.
I love that.
All right. Go to Mauricio Raúld's YouTube channel. All right. Last question for both of you. Where can people find you? Amanda, where do they find you, connect with you at?
I mean, if some of the tax stuff we talked about today is new to the listeners, the best place to find more information is our firm website, which is KeystoneCPA.com. A lot of great free downloadable resources, a lot of different tax strategies. If you're looking for daily tax tips or you just want to know what I'm doing every day, I'm mostly found on Instagram as Amanda Han CPA.
Perfect.
AskMauricio.com if you want to get a hold of me, or just go to Instagram, man. I'm there a lot.
You are
Mauricio
at
Mauricio Rauld, putting a lot of content there, a lot of stuff on legal strategies for everyone, syndication, taxes, personal development, and you can find out what time I get up every morning.
Which is early.
Which is early.
It is early.
All right, you guys. Thank you for joining us today for a wonderfully long, amazing show. You weren't kidding. I said 1 hour, right? We're slightly over that.
I said 45 minutes.
Yeah, we are right now. I don't even know. We're at a couple hours probably. Yeah, we're over 2 hours. So
2 hours.
Great. We'll edit it down to 12 minutes. Thank you guys for coming on today. You guys rock. Four-way fist bump.
Four-way, boom, boom.
And that, my people, is the show. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the insights from the episode. And hey, before you go, if you enjoyed this episode or you enjoy the show in general, please consider leaving us a rating and a review wherever you listen to podcasts. We really do value your feedback, and we read your comments to make future decisions about topics and guests and everything else. Plus, it helps us reach more people the more reviews we have. And last but not least, please head over to social media and consider friending, following, subscribing, and all that stuff to both Better Life at Better Life over on Instagram and my own personal at Beardy Brandon for more. That's Beardy with a Y at the end of it, Beard with a Y, Brandon on YouTube, Instagram, everywhere else. Thanks again for listening. I am honored that you would bring me along on your journey to building wealth without losing your soul. This show has been a production of the Better Life Tribe, copyright 2024. Our producer is Kevin Leahy with Podcast Point Man. Our videographer and all-around talented video guy, Carson Smith. My co-host is the amazing Cam Cathcart with DealFlowRealEstate.com. And finally, this show has been all about living a better life. But if you want my spiritual answer to what it takes to live not only a better life, but the best life, head over to abetterlife.com/best life. I got a 13-minute special video for you there. For the Better Life Tribe, my name is Brandon Turner, signing off.